Anyway, it seems like Alexander is one of these guys where it's sometimes if you're rude to him, he will order you killed or just kill you himself right there. And
Yeah,
other times he will like reward you for having the balls to be
it
rude to him.
definitely
So
does
it's like
depend on
you
his
never
mood.
know.
It
Yeah,
definitely does depend on his mood.
yeah,
I imagine he's in a wonderful mood even after being wounded in this battle after this one.
yeah.
So he's in a great mood. Suddenly, oh yeah, treat them well. They're it's the Persian queen. Don't disrespect them. They're the princesses. Had it gone badly and he'd still managed to accidentally get them or something, it might have been different.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, one of the next bit that comes up is that Darius sends a letter to Alexander, saying, "Look, seriously, give me
Yeah,
my
yeah,
family back.
yeah.
Give me my family back.
And I'll give you
And so being
everything from
serious
like
now,
the Euphrates or
yeah,
whatever, isn't it? Yeah.
yeah. I'll give you an insane amount of money. You can have half the empire, etc., etc., etc. Just give me my mum and my wife and my son back. Come on, be reasonable." And Alexander's reply is brilliant. You can tell that it's pissed him off.
Yeah.
He's like, he's like, are you fucking kidding me? No, come and get them. They're like, this is what do you think's happening here? Like, no,
But one
silly
thing,
bastard.
yeah. One thing that it always seems like such a tremendous sign of weakness on Darius's part, like
Yeah,
trying to pay them off initially, and then paying them off for Issus, and then oh I'll give you half the empire. It's like, dude, you look like you've already lost.
yeah. Well, that's what Alexander says. He says, well, if you haven't already lost, you'll come and take them from me. No,
Oh
that
yeah,
that sort of reply. It's like,
yeah,
no, we're both men. If you want them back, you come and take them from
yeah,
me, or he says something like, well, if you want to come and come to my feet, like kiss my feet,
yeah.
give up all of Persia, then maybe we can talk about something. We can do something. But until then, or he's like, well, I've got. I've got intelligence that you're actually raising another army, so fuck you, sort of thing, you
And
know?
what's
Like,
really interesting about this as well, after Issus, Alexander doesn't pursue Darius. Like he's like, no, I'm going to go and conquer Egypt
yeah,
first.
yeah,
It's that's
yeah.
very ballsy, and that's the thing. This whole thing is incredibly ballsy. Like I'm not going to be paid off, and I'm not even going to chase the guy down after I beat him. Well, that's weird because it's like, right, great, you've got him in a position of tremendous weakness. He's just lost an army. He's going to go off. But if you chase him, he'll have less time to raise a new army. Anything he raises against you will be fresh and half complete, so it'll be easier to defeat. He's not worried about that. He's not worried
Mm.
about the Persian army. He's like, no, I'll come. I'll defeat that when the time comes. We're just going to go and secure our rear here in Egypt, so they can't come behind us. It's like that's that's really brave. That's really bold. That's so confident. You know?
Yeah, I guess he must have gauged correctly, like how much of a victory Issus was. Um,
Yeah,
it seems that it wasn't. Well, Darius is still alive, but it seems that it wasn't. That's not the end of the game, but it's
yeah,
bought him maybe a couple of years, a couple of summers campaigning worth of time. It's going to take Darius or the Eastern Persian Empire a bit of time to recover from that. But yeah, he gauged it right. Again, it's just one of those things where it's not really explicitly said in the accounts, but you can only infer that Alexander was just good at what he was doing. They were
yeah,
professionals.
yeah,
They weren't chumps. They were
yeah,
never really caught out by anything.
yeah.
So yeah, I mean, good on them. But yeah, so Alexander and the army they go down that whole the coast of the Levant, I suppose you could say.
Mm,
Um, yeah, so they go down through Sidon. Sidon surrenders. Well, they come up to
yeah.
Tyre. Tyre's one of the big
So
sieges, one of the really big sieges.
before we get to that, I can just tie in something else again that I didn't know, but I've just found on Wikipedia that is interesting. After Issus, 8,000 of the Greek hoplites had survived, and they went to Sparta to serve with King Aegeus III, who's the guy who fights against the Macedonians, and is defeated by whoever it was, Aegis or no, hang on, who was it? The Megalopolis, because he defeats one Macedonian army, and then it's Antipater, sorry, who defeats him. Um,
Uh,
but yeah, so so it all ties in. Like it's these stories are all tied together. It's actually kind of like Star Wars in that way. Where it's like like you've got like 4 or 5 families that are effectively controlling the entire narrative of the arc of the films. It's kind of the same here, where it's like, Memnon knew Philip and stuff like this, and all this sort of stuff, and so it all ties together. It's all, all connected.
The accounts make it appear that there's like a very small number of individuals and a small number of families and a relatively small number of individuals that control the whole world.
Yeah. Yeah, but it is also kind of true, because these are the people who are making decisions, and the people who make the decisions are the ones who set the wheels in motion.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. No. Well. Sure. Sure. When you've got monarchies, absolute monarchies,
Yeah.
then it's like one mind can set policy. I mean, it's so much stronger than some goddamn committee.
Well, yeah.
All right. Well, the Siege of Tyre then is one of my favourite bits of the Alexander story. I don't really know why. I just have always really enjoyed it. One of the things to say is that Tyre is truly ancient. I mean, it's Carthage's mother city, so that gives it some perspective. And it's on a little island. I think today it still exists today. I think today there's a causeway out there.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure, but back then it was a full island, completely separated from the mainland. And they say, and they've got a great reputation, a big, well fortified island city. And they say, look, we're neutral. We don't wish you any harm. We're not going to put up any resistance to you, but you're not welcome in the city.
Yeah.
And that enrages Alexander. He's like, well, okay, well, I must besiege you now. I'm not having that. He's just like, no, that's not happening. And it ends up taking like, I don't know, 6-7 months or something. It's one of the longest times that Alexandria's held up. And even to the point, or 1 or 2 points, they're like, should we just move on? Because this isn't probably not going to happen for us. It's really hard. But Alexander refuses to give in. Again, that plays out another few times in the story. But he refuses to give in, and it's quite a long episode, and it's really good. The Macedonians decide to build a mole, what they call a mole, some sort of causeway, some sort of connecting bit of land out to this island, literally filling in the ocean, like land reclamation type thing.
Well,
and it's a massive project.
Like it is to the modern day. In fact, if you just look at Tyre on Google Maps, you can see where the old island was and how it's been connected. Like it would literally, I mean, it's obviously widened out in the meantime, but yeah, Alexander just filled it in with earth, because when you've got like 30,000 men that can all carry a bucket of earth, suddenly it's a doable project. So they literally just filled it up, because they didn't have a navy to speak of, and there was no particular way they were going to storm it any other way, so they couldn't stop the Tyrians, or whatever they call them, from resupplying from the sea, so they had to storm the place.
Yeah, and it's like quite a long, involved thing. The Macedonians start building this mole, and it's not that good. And then the Tyrrhenians, again, I don't quite know how you say that, but the people from Tyre sort of undermine it, and there's all sorts of back and forth, and they build a second one, then they build siege towers on top of the mole, and then Alexander decides that he has to try and cobble together some sort of navy, because, like, as you say, there's no way to really starve them out or anything like that while they still control the sea. So he cobbles together some sort of navy. It's actually during this period, or towards the end of the siege of Tyre, that the Phoenicians, a lot of the Phoenicians come over to the Greek side, and that sort of flips it into their favour. Where not long before they didn't have much of a navy at all, and now they're sort of in the ascendancy on the sea. But again, there's lots of back and forth. At one point, it's just in Curtius, but he says a whale. Like these little details, a whale sort of surfaces, and both sides think it's a good omen for them. And all these sorts of things. And it's actually one of the things you always think of Alexander as a guy on foot or on a horse traveling through, endless lands. But he's actually on ship quite a lot. Alexander, especially later in the story, but now you see him on ship a fair bit, sailing around and doing things actually on board. So he's not a novice to that sort of thing. But in the end, ultimately, again, there's quite a lot of pages in both Curtius and Arrian about this. But in the end, they're able to to storm it successfully. And again, they're pretty brutal once they get
Yeah.
inside.
But
Everyone.
it's worth pointing out just quite how like cinematic this whole thing is as well. Like it's really big, it's a big deal. Like they start building the stone causeway out towards the island, and when it starts getting close to the island, suddenly the Tyrian navy starts attacking it, and they can't construct any further. So Alexander brings up these giant siege towers that are apparently colossal, with like catapults and ballista on, and these are doing really good. They're doing really well. And so the Tyrians devise a counterattack, which is like getting an old transport ship, filling it with flammable stuff, and like pitch and sulfur and anything else that can burn, and then weighting it down so the front of it is slightly raised in the water, and then just sailing it directly as a suicide like explosion, a suicide bomber sort of ship to blow up the causeway and destroys these two siege towers and stuff like that. It's like, Christ, this is mad. Like, this is like manic stuff, and everything's on fire, and that's this is why it took so long. Alexander was trying to storm the place, and the Tyrians were fighting him off competently, very competently.
Yeah, they use that classic fire ship method. And it goes on for so long that at one point, like I think 6, 7 months, at one point Alexander's like just leaves and goes and besieges somewhere else for like a month or something, and comes back, and like his mole is destroyed, and he's like, right, we're going to redouble our efforts on a new mole, and we're going to get this done. And I think it's a great episode because it is quite cinematic. It's one of those ones where you get a sort of a blow by blow detail on things, and it's described almost in the modern way, where you're given sort of a clean description of what happens and in what order, which you don't always get with ancient writers, but in this one you do, and you sort of feel a bit sorry for the people inside Tyre, because a couple of times they think they're safe and they're sort of goading the Macedonians and things like that, and but when they do get inside, it's they slaughter 30,000 odd people apparently.
I mean, and so Tyre being an old city, like you said, and the mother of Carthage, has got a long and illustrious history of being besieged by lots of different Middle Eastern conquerors. The 7 or 8 month siege, as sieges go, that's actually quite a short siege. Most sieges seem to last a lot longer than that. People can get in sieges for years, and Tyre is a great example because Babylonian King Nebuchadnezzar II, who was prior to the Persians, controlled the Middle East. He'd laid siege to it for 13 years unsuccessfully. So he didn't even win this siege after 13 years. This is how militarily advantageous the position of Tyre was, because good access to the Mediterranean Great Fleet, and as a sort of gateway to the Middle East, so it became very, very wealthy. So, and it's a very, very difficult place to take. And so Alexander doing it in 6, 7 months or whatever it was, that's very, very good compared to the previous people who had tried to conquer Tyre and failed.
Yeah, I think in the scheme of things, 7 months isn't all that long, quite right. But for Alexander, it's a lifetime. It's like the accounts almost say like he's really pissed off, sort of with himself and with his own army for one of the first times. He's like, guys, why can't we get this done? Like what? You can imagine like a CEO who doesn't really know what it takes to put an equal number of blueberries in each muffin. He's just like, I just need this done. Just get it done. I don't care how. And people are exasperated. But in the end, it's a mixture. Towards the end, they talk about that the Macedonians get ships like right up to the walls of Tyre, and eventually able to storm the walls. And I think Alexander actually goes over himself. He's actually not the first over the wall, but he goes over the wall himself at Tyre. And just another example of him, making sure that he's being seen to get stuck in, not just doing it, making sure he's in the vanguard.
And this is quite a common occurrence for like Greek warrior kings. Lots of these people are very heroic and do this kind of stuff. Pyrrhus of Epirus is the one that springs to mind because he seems to have been basically like Alexander in the way that he was an absolute madman, and wanted to fight everyone around him all the time. So, yeah. And personally brave people are not that uncommon in this period, actually.
Yeah. Well, it was one of those things where you don't really get to be in that position unless you're brave, you know. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
yeah, or history is unlikely to remember
yeah,
you unless you did something
yeah.
quite brave.
But yeah, Alexander raises, according to Wikipedia, about 223 galleys, which gave him the advantage at sea from the previous cities that he'd conquered along the seaport. Like you say, he just takes their navies from the land.
Yeah, and that seems to work quite well up until Tyre, and but yeah, and then at this point, yeah, he goes from not really
Mm,
having any sort of naval power to dominating the seas really. But after Tyre, or by the time that sort of the Egyptian campaign, he more or less controls the
yeah.
Mediterranean, it seems. Um, but again, that's just from having peoples that are now his allies rather than a true Macedonian navy, if you like. But
Mm.
it doesn't matter, does it? I mean, if you're in control of it, you know, if you get to set the policy of it, it doesn't really matter if they're native Macedonians or not, I suppose.
Yeah, yeah.
And it's after this point, just before he moves on to Gaza, Gaza City, he gets another letter from Darius. It's a really similar thing. You know, I'll give you loads of money, 10,000 talents. You can have again everything sort of west of the Euphrates, and you know,
Mm.
maybe we can come to some sort of deal. And again, Alexander's it quite obviously pisses him off. You know, it's like, dear Darius, no, silly bitch. Of course not. Like, what the
Stop being
fuck
a
are you
pussy.
talking about? Yeah. Yeah, it's more than that. You're being, yeah. Like, it's just pathetic. And
Yeah, but this offends Alexander's sensibilities. If you're looking at this through the view of like the grand narrative of Homeric history, Darius is not playing his part. Darius is supposed to be fighting and like heroically losing his kingdom, so Alexander can effectively like pardon him for being the inferior man, but still fighting the good fight, and then give him a place in his court or something like that. But Darius isn't pulling his weight here. What a fucking loser. I'd be pissed off too. I'm
yeah,
like, no, I need you to be a strong enemy, you fool.
yeah, you're unworthy to be my enemy.
Yeah,
It is like that.
yes,
Like Alexander's actually angry at
yeah,
him. It seems that seems what it comes through. Like it's an
yeah,
affront. It's actually insulting to Alexander that
yes,
that,
yes.
that, that Darius thinks that Alexander might accept.
Yeah. It's like,
Alexander's
don't
like,
you
how dare you
understand?
even ask me that? Like you cheeky
Yeah,
cunt. Like fuck you. Like he's really he's really incensed that
yeah,
Darius
yeah,
thinks that Alexander would go for it. You know.
yeah.
Um,
I love it though. I love that is like the way that Alexander is viewing this, like it's a fairy tale story that he's playing a role in.
yeah.
It's that genuine. I completely agree. That's exactly how it came across to me as well when I first read it. It's like Darius, this is what I was saying. You seem weak. You're not respectable at this point. You know, you should give him hell, and he will treat you leniently. It was very obvious he wanted to.
Yeah, he was. Oh, well, yeah. Later in the story, we'll get to it. But yeah, he's dying for an opportunity. A bit like Caesar plays this out quite a lot. Julius Caesar. He's
Mm.
dying for an opportunity to show his clemency.
Yes,
You,
yes.
you know that's
Show his
one of the
nobility.
things
Yeah,
he
yeah,
wants. Yeah.
yeah. Yeah, totally agree. Totally agree.
So Alexander and the army come up to Gaza, what they call Gaza. I imagine it's Gaza
Yeah,
City because they say it's
yeah.
it's it's the last real town before you come to the Egyptian desert, which must mean the Sinai, what we call the Sinai Desert.
Yeah.
Um, he skips out Jerusalem, but because Jerusalem's a little bit inland, but he besieges Gaza, and again, it's a little bit of a difficult siege. Nothing like Halicarnassus or Tyre,
Well,
but
to just to pause there, that's an interesting thing that you even bring up. He skips out Jerusalem, because Jerusalem doesn't have any particular significance at this point, really, apart from to the Jews. Like there are no Christians, there are no Muslims. It's just the holy city of the Jews. But nobody gives a damn about the Jews, man. They got conquered like ages ago under the Babylonians, and then they got conquered by the Persians, and then they get conquered by Alexander. Then they get conquered by the Seleucids. Then they get conquered by the Romans. Like they're not an important people in world history until the religion starts, until Christianity is created and spreads.
yeah,
But it's interesting how you put that in there because, like, if you think about it geopolitically, Jerusalem's not in a very strategic place. It's not like it's on a trade road, but it's not a major thing, and it doesn't have good resources. It's not anything very important. It's religious
Yeah,
significance.
yeah. Because we're talking about the 330s, 320s BC, and in that age, yeah, Jerusalem or
The Israelites.
the Israelites weren't certainly weren't a power.
No.
Arian and Curtius don't mention it at all. It's not like then Alexander just accepted Jerusalem's submission or he deliberately skirted around Jerusalem. There's just no mention of it. And when they come out of Egypt, again, there's just no talk of them passing by Jerusalem or anything. It's just not that important. You're quite right. And yeah, well, it's just because, again, in that time, the 330s odd BC, yeah, it's just not of any real geopolitical importance or strategic military importance. Yeah.
Yeah, none at all. It's really interesting, isn't it?
But Gaza seems to have been, and that holds out. And eventually, when the Macedonians do take it, the guy, I can't remember the guy's name now, but the leader of Gaza, is like quite proud and haughty. And when he's brought before Alexander, all Alexander is looking for is a little bit of humility. Well, he needs him to bend the knee, basically, but he only really needs a little bit of humility. And the guy is just sort of brazen and doesn't really say anything and refuses to bow and all that sort of thing.
Bartis, his name is.
Sorry?
Bartis.
Right. And Alexander is incensed and decides to do a Hector on him as Achilles famously dragged Hector's body behind a chariot around and around the walls and defiled the corpse. He decides to do that to this guy, literally like put some sort of cord or wire through his ankles and drag him behind his chariot. I mean, so there's a few times in the Alexander story where there is a black mark, even for those days. I mean,
but it's only when they refuse to play their part in his narrative. That's the thing.
It wasn't for nothing. Yeah,
he's got a narrative in his head that he's expecting the world to conform to, and if they don't, he'll punish them for not. And it's so bizarre. It's so weird. Like he's living in a heroic adventure.
I mean, that particular story does make you think that, almost that Alexander was waiting for that sort of opportunity. He's like, cool. I've got a dude who's not playing ball. I can do an Achilles on him. And yes, I was waiting for this opportunity.
No. I the thing is, if he does look at the Iliad as like the manual of conduct, then it looks like he's got all of these stories prepared in his mind that he's been like, when he's alone, he'll go through what he'll say at that point if that happens to him, And so when something approximating it does happen, he can then do it, like this. Because like to Bartis, he would be like, what the fuck? I don't know. Who the fuck are you? Like, do I know you, or do I give a shit about you? Do I care about your narrative, your Greek narrative about Heracles and Troy? I don't know what you're fucking talking about. Fuck off. Hector and Troy. Sorry.
Yeah, no, you can imagine. So many peoples, especially when we get really far east, they've never heard of Macedonia or Greece.
No one's heard of Macedonia.
We're like in Pakistan or the Punjab, and this guy turns up from half the world away. And insists you submit to him, and it's like, who are you? Like, who is Achilles? I've never heard of any of these things. It's mad, really, isn't it?
Yeah, it's wild, isn't it? It's like what a bizarre world that they lived in.
But Alexander at Gaza gets another wound in the shoulder this time. I think he gets an arrow in the shoulder, and he does pass out from loss of blood. It's one of the more serious wounds he gets.
Blimey,
As I said earlier, in the end he has over 20 wounds, but only, I say only, but I think only 4 or 5 of them are really bad, like could have died from it. But I think this is one of them where it sort of describes him going into shock. So at first he's not that bothered, and it seems like a massively heroic thing. Oh, he's got an arrow sticking out of his shoulder, and he's still walking around. He's not even bothered. But then sort of the shock or adrenaline wears off, and it's pissing out blood, and he passes out, and everyone panics. But in the end, ultimately, he's all right. He recovers from it. But it's just that happens a few too many times,
Yeah, for comfort. Yeah. That just it goes to show that he was genuinely personally brave. I do like
Yeah,
one of the
yeah.
things like all of these sort of small side stories. The weird thing about I find all of them, even the Gordian knot, like the ones I'm personally dubious about, they're all congruent with Alexander's character. Like none of them feel out of character for him. Or at least I found anyway.
Mm.
Like I didn't disbelieve them on the face of it. You know, so it like
Yeah.
if it doesn't feel out of place for him to have done something like for like so, like someone steals Bucephalus and he's like, I'll kill their entire town or something. Yeah, that feels like the sort of thing Alexander would do.
Yeah, his character, although it is a bit, it's a to get a read on it in some ways. In other ways, it's really quite consistent. What he does and decides to do might be dictated by his moods, but those moods are relatively predictable. What
Predictable,
he's
yeah, yeah,
likely to do, if that's not
yeah.
counterintuitive what I'm saying, but
No, no, no. If the narrative hasn't played out according to plan, then he'll be in a bad mood and he'll do something terrible. But if it's gone well, he'll do the fairy tale thing to do in that point. And I just find that a really interesting consistency about him.
Yeah, or when they do finally take Gaza, I mean they sell everyone into slavery, and
Yeah,
it's
obviously.
that classic thing, no pity sort of thing. And then, well, the Persians were in control of Egypt, and they were so thoroughly defeated, if not completely destroyed, if not yet completely destroyed, they were so utterly defeated at Issus that Egypt uh, just surrenders to Alexander's army with there's no fight, no battle.
Well,
They
are
just
you familiar with the Persian history in Egypt?
some, not in a great amount of detail.
Right. Okay. So the Greeks have been involved in Persian Egypt for quite some time. The Athenians, a lot of Athenians have died trying to essentially, we can say liberate, but that's not really the right word. We could say liberate in the 5th century BC. Um, so in the like about probably about 100 years before this, lots of Athenians died here. And there's been long cultural contact between Greece and Egypt. Um,
There's that bit in Thucydides, isn't there?
which what where they die on the island?
An expedition.
Yeah,
Yeah.
the Athenian before the Persian invasion, I think, if I
Mm.
recall correctly, possibly. But yeah, anyway, quite not in the not so distant future, um, and the Persians conquered it. I think it was 525 BC. Let me just look this up before I.
Well, I know very broadly, yeah, the Persians had been overlords for a couple of hundred
Right.
years, in that ballpark.
525. Did I say 525?
I think you might have done. Yeah.
God, I got it right as well, right? So yeah, in 525 BC. So this is again about 150 years before. So it's not not very long ago, and it was very. There's a revolution against the Persians as well. Not long before this, that I think is it Darius has to put him down. Is it Darius who puts it down? I think
I'm not
Darius has someone's put down a revolution in Persia. Let me just check. Yes, when Darius first comes to power, um, the new king found himself in control of an unstable empire with large portions of governed by jealous and unreliable satraps, and yeah, so he has to go around putting down uprisings, and I'm pretty sure Egypt was one of these places. Let me.
Yeah, it must have been when he first became king, because it's
Yeah,
Darius isn't the king for long before
yeah,
Alexander invades.
yeah. I'm reasonably sure he does. It's been a while since I've read about this in great detail, but I'm sure that he has to put down one of the Persian kings. Maybe it was Artaxerxes who had to do it. But one of them had to put down a serious revolt in Greece, in Egypt even.
Right.
But I will look it up and I'll find it.
Oh, but I mean, like Alexander and Parmenio and his generals march in there, and the sort of the Persian satrap, I suppose, or the leader that's there, just says, "Okay, you're the new power, you know, you're the new faces on the block. I bend my knee, of course."
Sorry, right.
And okay.
Sorry, yeah. Just to tie this all up. So, in 351 BC, it was Artaxerxes. So, the one before the previous one, who had gone into Egypt with large army, and because Egypt had revolted under his father, he obviously won and reconquered Egypt. But in fact, he went through multiple campaigns. But yeah, he succeeded in Egypt, put down this giant revolt. Apparently, there were 100,000 army of 100,000 against him. And at one point, the Persians are apparently alleged to have nailed cats to their shields under the belief that the cats were a sacred animal to the Egyptians. And it would throw the Egyptians off their game effectively. I mean, they won, so maybe it was, who knows? Who knows where they're finding 100,000 cats from to nail to their shields, right? I don't know whether that's true or not. These are the stories that we have. But the point is, it's only 30 years before Alexander that happens. Like 20 or 30 years prior to Alexander invading the Persian Empire, that the Persians reconquered Egypt. So when Alexander gets there, the Persians, of course, they just like fuck the Egyptians, like fuck the Persians.
Yeah.
If you're gonna, because they've kicked our asses, they've sacked a bunch of our cities. You're obviously a better option because you're not doing that by default. So Alexander was kind of like a liberator to the Egyptians.
Yeah, I think that would have been a fair way, a fair thing to say. Yeah, they probably would have looked at it in that way. Yeah, I don't think they sat particularly comfortably under the Persian yoke.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah, no, not at all. They seem to have welcomed Alexander more or less with open arms. I mean, he goes to Memphis, which is the capital at the time, and yeah, it's just accepted as pharaoh. I mean, he becomes pharaoh.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. The Persian kings were the pharaohs at the time. Like they occupied the position, but I guess they wanted Alexander to have it because fuck Persia, says Egypt.
Yeah, and Alexander sails down the Nile, up towards the Mediterranean, up towards the Delta that way, and at the Delta founds Alexandria. There was nothing there at the time. There was no town there, and he founds Alexandria. There's no lighthouse or anything. That's not for another 80 years or so. But so that's founded right then, and that's quite a big thing.
Yeah, and what was I assume it was just because it looked like a sensible, strategic, and useful point.
Exactly that, yeah.
Yeah, because this is something Alexander does fairly often, isn't it? When he sees a strategic location or something that's not being already exploited, an advantage that's not being exploited, he exploits it, and it's like he feels like he's playing a game of Civilization. He really does. It's like so that's the sort of thing I would think,
Get a settler out and settle it here. This is the perfect spot.
He does though, it's like, okay.
I've heard it said different people say quite a different number for how many Alexandrias he founded, but I think it's about 9. I've heard people say
about a dozen.
Way more than that, but
I remember hearing about a dozen being the sort of average estimate. But I mean, that's a lot of cities to found for one guy to found, isn't it?
Yeah. And then
it seems like a lot to me.
It's actually quite a fun little story. In Arian, anyway, he says Alexander just sort of lays out a really, really rough outline of where he wants a city to be founded, and then just moves on and expects it to get built, and it does. And I mean, just the sort of power only a few men in history have really ever wielded that sort of that sort of authority,
Yeah.
It's just interesting, even if you don't like the guy. But he moves along.
Well, before we go on, it gives you a sort of impression about the infrastructure that he must have had at his disposal, because, just saying it is one thing, but making it happen is something else. So he must have had merchants and like tradesmen and all this sort of stuff just following the army as if the army was like a mobile city, because this is what people get is like camp followers, they would normally be called, like non-combatants who are not necessarily with the army but are servicing the army, and that would have been one of those things that he would have effectively got them to do, I think.
Yeah. I mean, the traveling band is like tens of thousands of non-combatants traveling with it. Washerwomen are one of them, the ones that get talked about quite a lot. You always
prostitutes.
You need lots of washerwomen and prostitutes if you're going to have a moving pre-modern army. Well, they just come with it.
Yeah, I mean, like the thing is that the soldiers are paid, so they get money, and they make money when they loot places, and so there's a lot of money to be made from soldiers, like if you're providing services of whatever type, no judgment here, So it like it's a whole economy. It's like a moving city. It genuinely is like a moving city that devours other cities.
Yeah, yeah, but I mean, just washerwomen and prostitutes are just the tip of the iceberg. You would have had all sorts of artisans and
Yeah,
craftsmen and specialists of all different stripe. I mean, even in Alexandria, you've got like historians that come along with it, people that are supposed to be documenting it. Callisthenes is really one
yeah,
of those. I think he's Aristotle's nephew or something. But there would have been like botanists or geographers coming along with it, all sorts of different things. And yeah, this you can only really picture a massive train of civilians. I mean, a lot of the soldiers, the actual combatants, might have brought their families and things. So
mm, mm.
yeah, it would have been a traveling, yeah, sort of a traveling city, yeah. And as I say, his campaign is 12 years long, and it gets bigger and smaller at certain points. And I mean, this is one of the points where Alexander moves across the coast of North Africa there, and and then sort of famously cuts down straight into the desert for the Siwa oasis. And he
Yeah,
wouldn't have taken the whole army on that particular sort of expedition. That sort of because it's silly. It was going through the desert. It was a
yeah.
little bit of a survival exercise. So that this next little bit we're going to talk about is actually an exception to what to what we were just saying about the traveling city.
Yeah.
Nonetheless, it's a very very good point, and definitely worth bearing in mind nearly the whole time. There's this oasis fairly deep in the desert, far to the
This,
west of
yeah,
Memphis.
this is the Oracle, isn't it?
Yeah, the Oracle
Yeah,
at Siwa. It's a
yeah,
place called
yeah.
Siwa, the Siwa Oracle, the Siwa Oasis, and it's this oasis in the middle of the desert. And well, one of the things is that uh, Alexander claimed descent. It's not uncommon. Claimed descent from divine peoples. He thought his family would have descended from Hercules,
Yeah.
um, among other things. I
Properly
think on
said
one.
Heracles, yes.
Yeah. Well, Heracles and Hercules are the same, right?
Yeah,
It's
yeah,
just
it's just the Greek and
how
Roman
you pronounce.
pronunciations, yeah.
What do you, just out of interest, what do you usually go with if you were going to say Heracles or Hercules?
I usually use the Roman one because it's more common in modern English.
Hercules.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, I would usually. Yeah, me,
But
me too.
Heracles is the Greek pronunciation, isn't
Yeah, and so at the Siwa Oracle, well, there's some weird stories on the way there that some snakes or possibly some crows led the way through the desert.
it? Yeah. But there
But
always are about weird oracles. There are always weird, like the wildlife is in on the narrative. So yeah, don't take any of those seriously.
yeah, yeah. Well, on another part of Alexander's family claimed to have been descend from Perseus. But
Oh,
anyway, building on that, he wanted. Well, this oracle says that he has descent from Zeus, or if you like, Jupiter or Amun,
yeah.
the chief Egyptian deity at that time anyway was Amun Ra, or just Amun, or Zeus Amun. It's like in the ancient world, in polytheistic religions, I'm sure you know, it's a lot more
Yeah.
complicated. You don't just have one godhead that's one defined thing. It can be all sorts of things to all different people. You know how like you've got a Pallas Athena and Nike Athena,
Yeah.
for example. Just one
Yeah.
example. It's both Athena, but they've got sort of a different guise or a different
Well,
personality.
I've
Sorry,
got a very, very easy way of explaining this. It's like superheroes.
right?
It's exactly like superheroes movies. So you've got Spider-Man, and then you've got like the Miles Morales Spider-Man, and then you've got like alternate universe Spider-Man, Bizarro, whatever, and all this sort of stuff. So then you've got like Superman, and then Superman who lands in Russia, and so, but all of them essentially are archetypes. And what ancient people all practiced is what we call syncretic religion, I think it's called, where you would identify, right, who's the father god at the head of the pantheon, right? So that's Zeus, that's Jupiter, that's Ammon, right? Okay, so we've got that archetype filled. Then who's the disobedient daughter, right? So it's Athena, it's Ishtar, it's whoever, some Celtic goddess, all these sort of, and they're all different because they come from different cultures, but they fulfill the same position in the archetype. and that's, I think, the easiest way to understand them. So, and it's essentially like superheroes. There are twists on them. There are different timelines, like so several versions of the Joker. But it's the Joker character.
Mm.
And it's that kind of thing. So there are several, like, for each culture, they'll have their own weird. Here's a tale about Ishtar, which you might interpret as Athena or whatever, whoever it is. And you'll identify them in the same sort of area, but it'll just be an interesting, weird, foreign take on it. And it's the same thing with the superhero things. That's the easiest way to understand, I think.
Yeah, that's quite a good analogy. I mean, I remember talking to somebody once about Alexander, and they didn't really know anything about it, and I mentioned like Zeus Ammon, and I tried to explain it for a while, and they just couldn't seem to get their head around
Really?
how it could be Zeus and Ammon right at the same time, and
Yeah.
that just is possible. It's fine. The symbolism seemed to work in
Yeah.
the ancient mind, and that's
Yeah.
that's all that really matters, right? I mean,
Yeah.
the Roman accounts we got of it don't seem to have any problem with it, and
None
and
at all.
Alexander, the pharaoh Alexander, because being a pharaoh means you're divine, doesn't it?
Yep.
But to claim descent directly from Zeus or Amun is a bit of a jump. The Macedonians, the Greeks, who were
They
always
don't believe that.
yeah,
Like,
yeah, it's not cool.
they don't that okay, yeah, so that's really important, because what this is two different, really different traditions that are sort of coming into contact with one another. The Egyptian tradition of having the god essentially as being the head of the state and physical, whereas, I mean, it's not unusual in Greek myth to claim descent from gods, but that doesn't mean you're actually more important just because of it. It means that you're expected to succeed because of it. Not like Alexander and his men. They talk very freely to each other. That, like, there's no great ceremony to address Alexander. Whereas to address a pharaoh, there absolutely is a great ceremony. So the average person, the average soldier, doesn't like talk to Alexander in the same way he would talk to a pharaoh in Egypt. So this is a very interesting, and this is something that the Macedonian soldiers themselves complain about later on in the campaign, is that, and Alexander says, well, have I ever made Macedonians bow at my feet like the Orientals do? It's like, no, but you let the Orientals bow at your feet like you're fucking better than us. Like, it's very interesting sort of sociological thing that's going on here, I think.
Yeah, I think that, well, this idea that, well, much later on, he does sort of ask the Macedonians to prostrate themselves before him, and it becomes a massive thing, one of their main gripes.
Absolutely.
Because
it's totally outside of their traditions.
yeah, it's just not cool. It's okay to say one of your ancestors is Hercules. It's not
Yeah.
cool to say you're the son of Zeus, and therefore you have to sort of lay face down before me and things. So the Greek men weren't down for that. Even though he's their king, you're supposed to be able to drink with him and slap him on the back and talk about times when you were in battle together and it's not a problem. But
he's a king, not a god. That's the thing.
Yeah,
He's a king, not a god.
exactly.
The Greeks weren't servile to that point.
And that does come to a head a couple of times later on in the story. But at the Siwa oracle, they say he gets what he's looking for. These oracles aren't stupid. They're savvy operators, really.
Well, I told you they're political, man.
And,
They're totally political. Like that oracle, the priest there interpreting that was like, this guy's just smashed Darius. He's taken Tyre, which no one's ever taken before. He came down and fucked up Gaza. They, the administrators in Egypt have prostrated themselves to him. We better give him something good.
Yeah. He wants to hear that he's the son of a moon. We're gonna tell him that he is.
yeah. It's quite easy for us to pass this off.
And again, it's one of those examples. I actually can't remember. It was only about a week ago I bloody read this, but I can't remember in exact detail how it goes. But I do seem to remember the impression that Alexander does the same thing that he usually does when he comes up against an oracle. He doesn't really give them much of an option. It's just sort of he doesn't just tell me whatever you're going to tell me. He's like, he's like, I want to hear this, and they oblige. It's more like that than anything else. But and then apparently it's quite a tough route, just straight east across the desert back to Memphis. But it's about this time that he starts to, or as he's moving out of Egypt again, that he gets news that Darius is, because a bit of time has passed since Issus now.
Well, yeah,
Um,
we're probably talking nearly a year has passed at this point.
mm, mm,
So
yeah.
Darius has had plenty of time to raise a nice big fat army, and his kingdom depends on this. Like he knows that, all or nothing now.
What Darius has done is that he's done, I suppose, the only prudent thing he could do after Issus is that he escapes east and then just raises another army, actually a bigger army than was at
Yeah.
Issus, from everyone east of the Tigris sort of thing. So there's like Sogdians, Bactrians, there's a like, sort of famous Bactrian horsemen are supposed to be great
Yeah.
cavalry, and Scythians even, and Indian divisions, or what
Yeah.
they call India. It's actually sort of modern day Pakistan. But people from all over that part of the world, from sort of the near Central Asia and Afghanistan and all that. And he raises a huge army, and
It's very diverse.
it is.
Diversity is Darius' strength.
And what Darius realizes, it really worked for him as well, didn't it?
No, it didn't.
Um,
The little homogenous Macedonian force takes him apart. Spoilers. Sorry.
Well, what Darius realizes is, or what he blames his defeat on at Issus heavily, or what it's nice for him to think anyway, is that it was just a matter of terrain and maneuvering. If I could just get Alexander on a big, giant, open, flat plain, then he can't do any clever shenanigans, and my numbers will simply be easily enough to defeat him. And it was only that I was penned into that little pass there that allowed Alexander even the chance to beat me. That's what he keeps telling himself.
And in Darius's defense, this is actually quite a good argument. It's really not a bad argument. This small, heavily armored, heavily well trained force. When put in an advantageous, if Alexander were going to choose to fight somewhere, if a commander was going to choose to fight somewhere, it would be like at Issus, where Darius was unable to use his army to greatest effect. Obviously, it's a strategic advantage. So it is totally. He's completely correct about the assessment of his army. If he has a great open plain, he has a massive advantage over Alexander. So he's right about this. He's not irrational or anything.
Yeah, no, you're right. You are right, and he was right. But that's not the end of the story. So obviously, we do end up with the battle on a big open plain. It doesn't go any better particularly. Yeah.
But
he
didn't know that it wouldn't. It was his best shot by a mile.
It's one of those things. Arian spends a paragraph or two talking about it, where it might be. It is the case that Issus was too confined for his army. That's true. But if you keep telling yourself that's the only reason, then you're deluding yourself, because it wasn't the only reason. And he says about how courtiers or sycophants are like the bane of all kings. If you allow yourself to let your sycophants reinforce what you already think, then that's a road to ruin, almost certainly. Yeah. And that's what Darius is doing to himself. It's like, oh, all I need is an big open plain, and I'll definitely win. There's no other way that Alexander could win. It was just that. And some of his advisors say, no, it's not just that. They're professional soldiers, and we're not. Alexander is a genius. Our generals aren't. It's this, and this, and this. And Darius is just like, no, la, I'm not hearing that. All I need is a big open field.
Echo chambers, man. They've always existed.
Yeah, exactly. Arian basically describes that Darius is in an echo chamber about the narrow battlefield at Issus. That he can't really move on from that.
And it's the same with the Athenians and Demosthenes. I recorded a clip from it on one of my alternate channels called "Demosthenes Rebukes the Athenian Echo Chamber," because it sounds exactly like he's addressing just this echo chamber where everyone's in agreement, and it's like this is a common phenomenon. This is not new to the modern age.
Yeah, shit, I did have the quote, but I can't find it. Of that exact quote of saying how sycophants are can be the bane of kings. But yeah, so totally the Battle of Gaugamela, or sometimes called Arbela. There's another town or settlement also near it called Arbela. So if I ever describe it as Arbela, it's Gaugamela. It's the same thing, same place. And it is a massive open plain.
Yeah.
It is completely flat, apparently,
It's
and even the
in
small number.
northern Iraq for anyone who's wondering where on the map we're talking here.
Yeah, yeah, it's basically
Yeah.
it's right near the Tigris, isn't it?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's Iraq, and and
Yeah.
even the very very small rises in the ground or hillocks that there are, Darius orders flattened
Yeah.
before the battle because he wants absolutely nothing to sort of help Alexandria in any single in any way.
Yeah.
So he does try and stack the battlefield in his favor as much as possible, and he couldn't really ask for much more. He does sort of get what he wants in that sense.
Yes.
Right, yeah, well, so the battle itself then, so Darius's army is, again, truly gigantic. It must be, well, it's in the hundreds of thousands, it seems like.
Yeah.
It's huge. And Alexander's is I think we're talking 50, 60,000 now. So it's, it's significantly bigger than when he crossed the Hellespont, which is interesting because some armies snowball or are able to snowball, and some aren't, are they? They just sort of slowly dwindle. But Alexander obviously is able to. Well, he's got a bandwagon, and people sort of hitch
Well, yeah.
themselves to his star.
And not only that, so like, yeah, so it's not really very surprising, especially when you find willing places that wish to be liberated from their previous rulers. It's not very difficult to raise men, especially if you're winning. You know, like a lot of guys will be like, yeah, fuck those guys. You're gonna go fuck them up some more, right? I'm coming. You know, I volunteer. I'll come and join your army and stuff like this. And that's usually something that's deeply well received by the conqueror, because usually you've expended a lot of men getting to where you are. Alexander actually hasn't expended a lot of men, but yeah, like recruiting well motivated and eager young men into your army, like you definitely do it as much as possible. Honestly, I'm surprised he didn't recruit more. Like Egypt's not a small place. He could have undoubtedly, you would have thought, raised loads. But yeah, he's victory, like you say, is snowballs. It's only when you're trapped in like enemy terrain that you can't do this really.
Yeah, Curtis is quite rude about the Egyptians. Actually, I think he just calls them something like lazy, or they never they never really do anything for themselves unless you sort of whip them to do it.
Yeah.
He's actually quite rude about all sorts of people. It's quite funny. But in Arian, just before the battle, actually in Curtius and Arian, there's a big list of the both sides. That's a classic thing you get in a lot of ancient historians is big long battle lists of what's going on. It's a little bit boring, but well, nonetheless, it's there. It's good for people that are military history buffs when that they love that. Again, it's sort of like gold dust to them. Exactly who was standing where and what formation.
Yeah, I think that's great though. I really like it. It gives you like it seems like it's a way of honoring the people who fought, and the thing that it gives you is like texture of the world, because it makes you realize that look, like all of these nations, a lot of them are really from quite different places, so it is an interesting, and it is like a progressive project that the Persian Empire has achieved here. It's very, very diverse. They're not wrong when they say that. It is, it is interesting. But yeah, sorry, Karen.
Well, I mean, suppose so. The dynamics of the battle itself. It's one of those, because it is an open plain. Alexander, his main worry, if you like, is getting completely surrounded, and because even he would find it difficult to win in that situation. So he makes his flanks very heavily defended, and he realizes he has to do something sort of risky or extremely brave in order to punch through the line. He can't just try and make.
Before we go on, sorry, I think we forgot to talk about the composition of the Persian army, because the composition of it is very interesting. So looking at the Wikipedia breakdown, and this is something I forgot to bring up. They allegedly Darius had 15 war elephants, 200 scythe chariots, only 1,500 archers, which I find a surprisingly low number. But thousands of cavalry, something like 50,000 cavalry or 40,000 cavalry, something like that. 10,000 Persian immortals, 10,000 Greek mercenaries, and then tens of thousands of infantrymen, just levy infantrymen. So it's a combined armed force with just a huge array of things. And the Greek army doesn't have the Macedonian army doesn't have that kind of like diversity of arms. It's very specialized.
Yeah, oh God, yeah. I mean, the Persians seem obsessed with chariots. It doesn't matter how.
Yeah.
It seems like it doesn't matter how many times chariots perform poorly
Yeah. Yeah.
in a battle. They never give up on them.
Well, they're a prestigious thing. That's the thing. It's prestigious.
Yeah. And but by now the Macedonians are masters of dealing with chariots and war elephants. You do it the same way. You just get out of their way. Like a man can move laterally
Yeah.
just a lot easier and faster than a
Yeah.
chariot or a war elephant. You sort of just step to the side.
Yeah. I mean,
It's really not hard.
this is what they did with Xenophon. You know, one guy gets run over and then gets back up. Like,
Yeah.
they're not that dangerous.
Yeah, and you would think that the Persians might sort of clock this and realize,
Yeah.
oh, these are actually quite ineffectual. They look good, maybe, but they're not actually very
They
effective.
probably
But
sound intimidating. That's the thing. When they when you've got like 200 sized chariots like thundering across the battlefield at you, drawn by horses, that's probably scary. But if you just keep your nerve and just move, you're fine. Don't panic and rout, which undoubtedly that would have been the purpose, to get them to panic and rout. But if you don't, then you'll be fine. Just don't worry about it.
Yeah, one of the things in this battle is that I think Alexander sort of waits a while, and the Persians are left sort of in their formations for all of the morning under the sun, and they didn't get to have breakfast or something, and the Greeks did get to have breakfast, and that's a big a big difference if you're going to fight all day long, sort of thing. And it's one of those things where what Alexander is famous for, or known for, if you're like a military history buff, is like this irresistible charge.
Yeah.
That's what he's famed for. Is that when his companion cavalry, the chosen few, his closest confidants, when they decide they're going to charge, it's very, very difficult. There's certain cavalries throughout history, like the Norman cavalry,
Oh God, yeah.
To be sort of, you couldn't really stand up against them. Not really anything in the world could, and they've got this reputation. Nonetheless, you still need your timing to be right. You can't waste it. You can't just charge. Even Alexander and his companion cavalry can't just charge into 100,000 men and kill them all. But nonetheless, I don't know if you want to, or much about the real minutiae or detail of the Battle of Gaugamela, but there's a lot of sort of maneuvering and a feint here and there.
Yeah.
But ultimately, it's one of those things where he gets a phalanx to sort of draw a chunk of an infantry screen away from right in the center. Darius is in the center to draw them away, which causes just a little gap, just a tiny little gap, which Alexander can attempt to almost suicidally attempt to just dive into and just make straight for Darius. And Darius is surrounded by the royal guard, the famed royal guard. But what they always say that they've got sort of apple-shaped golden pommels on the bottom of their spears or something like that. Anyway, you can see them. It's absolutely clear where Darius is, who he is in his sort of royal chariot, the whole entourage around him. Actually, I think there's some accounts of that there were fake or phony decoy Dariuses on the battlefield. Yeah,
I wasn't aware of that.
It was clear that who the real one is. And Alexander sort of, when he sees his chance, makes for that. And I know it's the whole
as I understand it, essentially Alexander kind of twists his army to the left. He's on the right with the companion cavalry, and I think it's Parmenion on the other, on the far left with cavalry on that side, and then the infantry is in an like oblique sort of diagonal echelon, so the right flank is the closest to the enemy line, and the infantry is like staggered to kind of draw the rest of their army around to face it, to create the gap.
Yeah, that's exactly right.
Yeah, but they start losing on the left flank, don't they? Which is why he doesn't chase him down. He has to go and save the left.
Yeah. After he's broken through. I mean, this is great stuff. I mean, this is where world history turns on a few minutes. Really, like the whole of world civilization is decided on what happens in a what a very few number of men do in a really small window of time. It's incredible, really, that it can boil down to these things when big battles happen. If I do a quick quote from Arian, he says, quote, "And this was Alexander's opportunity. He promptly made for the gap, and with his companions and all the heavy infantry in this sector of the line, drove in his wedge, and raising the battle cry, pressed forward at the double, straight for the point where Darius stood. A close struggle ensued, but it was soon over, for when the Macedonian horse, with Alexander himself at the head of them, vigorously pressed the assault, fighting hand to hand and thrusting at the Persian faces with their spears, and the infantry phalanx in close order and bristling with pikes added its irresistible weight, Darius, who had been on edge since the battle began, now saw nothing but terrors all around him, and was the first to turn tail and ride for safety." End quote.
God damn. No, that's fantastic, because Alexander has there's a quote from, there are very few quotes from Alexander, like direct quotes of Alexander, but one of them, and it summed up what you were saying just before you read that out, and it summed up a very pithy way. Upon the conduct of one depends the fate of all, and that's a fascinating phrase, because like it's a way of like England expects every man to do his duty, like.
Yeah.
You like, it's one of those like even no matter how small a part you have, the fate of all depends on your conduct, and that applies to everyone. So it's a very punchy way of summarizing that. I think it's really, I find that absolutely love it. But yeah. So Alexander has this mighty mailed fist that he goes in, and he's like right at the front as well, isn't he? Like an absolute maniac.
Yeah, like that. He is the tip of the spear punching that web through the gap. It's mad. It's mad.
It's such tremendous danger to put the leader in. Like, you'd be like, look, could not anyone else go first? It's like, no, I'm going first. It's like, that's mad. And Pyrrhus does the same thing. It's like, you should not be putting yourselves in such danger. I mean, like, the confidence they must have had is insane.
Yeah, they're like the sons of God going forth to war. They really embody like the ultimate soldier in a way. They're just really honest to God, prepared to die right there and then for a chance at some glory.
It's wild, isn't it? It's like, you madmen.
Yeah,
but that's what they were like.
And apparently Alexandria himself was also very conspicuous. Like some sort of golden crown, a bejeweled belt. A breastplate or a cuirass or whatever. That's obviously extremely valuable, and he's not trying to hide in any way.
Yeah.
So nearly everyone on that plane might have been able to see what was happening, what was going on. Well, again, just like at Issus, when Darius does flee, that's sort of the end of the day in a way. It causes a big rout. But as you mentioned, Parmenio needed some help on his wing, so Alexander couldn't actually chase Darius down right there and then in real time, because he gets really close to him. I think really close to him in that battle, but he can't chase him immediately because he has to go and help Parmenio, and Alexander is a bit pissed off about that. But apparently the Thessalian cavalry fought as well as Alexander's companions themselves, and everyone was covered in glory and very few casualties relatively compared to giant casualties for the Persians. And and Alexander captures all Darius's sort of baggage, his like royal baggage train again for the second time. No,
it really is this is the glorious victory. I think it was wasn't it the cavalry commander Bessus who was commanding the Persian right, so he was decking Parmenio. So again, one thing that's important to note is that the Persians do have some professional military forces. They just do the Middle Eastern thing of also raising like hundreds of thousands of plebby foot soldiers, which, I mean, I suppose is impressive. But when it comes to a professional military force like the Macedonians, like they've got the 10,000 immortals and then probably, like another 50,000 professional cavalry around the empire, something like that. But they're having just masses of men is rarely that useful. Like, it seems to always be more useful to have a better army than a bigger army.
Yeah, well, gosh, I absolutely agree with you. I mean, there's so many examples. There's so many examples.
But this is the mistake the Persians make. Rather than doing the Roman thing and having like like the Roman Empire at its height had something like 300,000 soldiers garrisoning the whole damn empire. And that's literally all of the Mediterranean and the Middle East. So it's like, that's, 65 million people, 300,000 people commanding it. That's tiny. That's
Yeah.
absolutely tiny. And the Persians essentially should have just not had, but the Persians had something like 56 million people in the Persian Empire. I've seen one estimate. They probably had like less than 100,000 professional sort of Persian soldiers, and then relied on raised manpower across the rest of that territory. It's like that's the wrong way to do it. Clearly, Alexander showed it.
Yeah, famously they had the Immortals, which were supposed to have been, highly drilled, highly
Yeah,
disciplined, but I don't think there was that many of them. Certainly not
10,000.
as a matter of a
Yeah,
ratio. Not
yeah,
that many of them.
yeah, 10,000, and they weren't even that good.
Yeah. Right.
Well, no, the reason they were called immortals is that when one died, he was immediately replaced with another man, right? So that's why they're called the immortals. Yeah, and they are like professional soldiers, so they're doubtless best that the Persians have to offer, but they don't. I mean, there aren't any particular scenarios that I can ever recall them doing very well.
Mm.
I mean, where
Yeah.
do they cover themselves in glory?
No, you're right. I don't recall off the top of my head when
Ever,
they did. I
right?
think it might have been one of those things where it's a sort of a famous unit that maybe
Yeah,
many generations ago had some incredible feats under their belt.
yeah,
But
possibly.
but by the time of Alexander, not so much.
No.
You can say that, but again through history, there's like the Janissaries used to be good and then weren't
Oh
anymore.
yeah,
And
yeah,
there's
yeah.
quite a few examples of that sort of thing. They become
The
corrupted, like the
legionaries
Praetorian Guard.
themselves.
Yeah,
Roman,
yeah,
the Roman legionaries. When Attila encounters them, they're cowering behind their shields, as far as he's concerned,
yeah.
and he mocks them, just like, "Oh, these are the vaunted Roman legions, are they? It looks like they're a bunch of cowering boys." And it's like, oof. All right, rub it in.
But so like Darius flees sort of into Media, like the Median lands,
Yeah,
sort of beyond the Armenian mountains, and he calculates that Alexander won't follow him, will make straight for Babylon and Susa, and he's actually right. Alexander does do that.
yeah.
Um, and so the road is open. The Persians have been defeated in a large battle for the third time now. Darius defeated twice personally, and unlikely to raise another giant army. He's basically won. Alexander's basically conquered, done the hardest part. Anyway, he isn't really. There's still armies out there, but
Yeah,
he's
well,
broken
while
the back.
Darius is free, he is the legitimate emperor, so he's got
Yeah,
to
it's not
capture the
over.
rights.
Oh
Yeah.
God, yes, no, it's not over. But he's broken the back of it. He's done
Oh
the
yeah.
hardest,
Yeah.
most dangerous, most risky bit.
Yeah.
Is done, and the road is open to Babylon. Babylon itself.
Yeah. 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 And the entry into Babylon's good as well, isn't it?
Yeah, well, so Babylon, as I mentioned at the beginning, it's not Persian, it's Babylonian, and they've just merely been under the rule of the Persians for like a couple of hundred years. And when Alexander gets there, sort of the natives, if you like, welcome them to some degree.
Mm.
Um,
Well,
you
the Macedonians start taking on their customs and stuff like that, don't they? Um, like identifying them with like their religious figures and things like this. Because like for context, Babylon is probably the most ancient and famous city in the world. It's it's where culture. It's the center, of like ancient Near Eastern life. So everyone had heard of Babylon. It's famous for its antiquity. It's literally one of the original Sumerian cities. So it's so old, it's unreal. Like, the Babylon, the founding of Babylon to Alexander is probably about twice as far distant to Alexander to us is how old it is. It's
yeah.
such an old city, and it's such prestige. Like writing is invented here, and so it features heavily in the Jewish canon. They've had their empires. They are the cultural center through which Middle Eastern culture is generated, and then spreads out. Everyone adopts parts of Babylonian culture. That's why the Old Testament looks like Babylonian myths so closely. It's through the Babylonian captivity. It obviously gets, ingested by the Jews who are in Babylon before they go back to Israel, to Jerusalem. So like Babylon is a tremendously important place. So I mean, Cyrus predicting he's going to go to Babylon. Well, of course you're going
to. Yeah, well, so the technically the capital of the ancient Persian Empire is Persepolis. And Susa is sort of their summer capital, and Babylon is sort of their second city. But when Alexander takes it, he's like, he wants, well, in the end, right near the end of the story, he comes out with this explicitly, but he wants to make Babylon the capital, not Persepolis. He'll move it from Persepolis to Babylon. He considers Babylon the real center, if you like, I suppose culturally or whatever.
But it was like the center of the world,
Yeah, and he considers it the center of his empire or his world now. And he says long before there's any question of it happening, he says, "I want to die in Babylon." When they get inside for the first time, he's sort of a bit wowed. Remember, he comes from Pella, this little this little village in Macedonia. Basically, it's like seeing these giant halls with big pillars and
Babylon had giant blue walls, like blue
these
walls
turquoise bricks, those famous turquoise bricks.
With animals, like golden animals painted on the bricks and stuff. Like it's easy to find replicas and stuff. I mean, it was a genuinely glorious city, and ancient, prestigious, beautiful, enormous, spanning the river. It's a phenomenal thing that they've entered. And I say, like, in the film they have the Macedonians joking about like the grandsons of pig herders or something, sitting on the thrones of emperors, and like, and it's definitely the right kind of atmosphere that it would have had when they went in there. Definitely.
Yeah, there's lots of gold and silver and jewels. Lots of things are bejeweled. Yeah, and I think Alexander and his men, Alexander himself, were awed by it in a way.
Yeah.
There's one line, I can't remember if it's Curtius or Arrian now, but he said something like, "Oh, this is what it means to be a king, or to be a king of kings. Rooms like this, halls like this. Some of the architecture, you couldn't quite believe it. It's one of those things. Again, like giants must have built this. Again, just such finery and treasure that they hadn't really expected it.
They didn't know that this kind of wealth existed. Nothing in the Greek experience prepares them for the riches of the East.
Yeah, and as I say, it makes a lasting effect on Alexander because from that point onwards, he wants it to be his seat, his regal seat, which should be Babylon.
Well, everyone does. Everyone wants Babylon as the regal seat, don't they?
Yeah, but eventually, I mean, they stay there for a while and have a lot of drinking bouts. Alexander's been a bit maligned actually for being an alcoholic or just a drunk. I don't think he was particularly. Curtius and Arrian both say he liked to drink, but he wasn't a degenerate. He wasn't a drunk. So it's one of those things over history, or certainly in the 20th century, people have sort of.
It's become fashionable to paint him that way.
Yeah, exactly. There's definitely examples of when he's been drunk and done some bad things. We'll get to, but I don't think he is a drop-down alcoholic or anything. But
is that any more unusual than any other young man, though? That's the question. Because it's like, I mean, like if when I was young, I used to go drinking maybe once a week, maybe once every couple of weeks, and so I've got lots of interesting stories where I've gone out drinking with my mates. Of course, I didn't conquer the Persian Empire, but like I didn't have an army, so But had I an army, maybe I would have done. Who knows?
Yeah.
I don't think I agree with you. I think he's being unfairly maligned here. I don't think he was an out and out drunk.
No, I think it's Curtius right at the end when he's sort of summing up. He explicitly says he wasn't. So all the novels where they have Alexander as some sort of degenerate, some sort of pathetic souse. I don't think that was the case, but it couldn't have been the case. The amount of campaigning he did, but after they go to Babylon for the first time, they stay there for a while and sort of relax for a bit. But nothing's over. Darius is still out there, as you said.
Yeah.
So they move on to sort of the next city going east, which is Susa. And
I tell you,
Susa is
it must have been tough to leave Babylon after like
yeah,
it's
yeah,
it's a notoriously well, I mean, like, in degenerate city, so they would have had any worldly pleasure that would have been available in Babylon, and Alexander's troops would have had a lot of money at this point. They with all of these victories, all of these conquests, every stripped body from a battlefield, every payout from Alexander himself, they would have had a lot of money to spend in Babylon.
yeah, for sure. Well, it's from this point onwards, money's not a problem for
Yeah, yeah,
Alexander. From
yeah,
this
yeah.
point onwards, like they got a lot of treasure when they got to Damascus and a
Mm,
couple of places earlier on. They got big chunks of treasure, but from
yeah.
Babylon, yeah, you can just hand out tens of thousands of talents. It seems
It does seem that. Yeah.
for a laugh if you want to. Yeah, so money from that point on, yeah, Alexander never has to worry
Yeah.
about how he's going to pay anybody or anything at all. Yeah, quite right. Oh, well, when they get to Susa, there's another treasury there.
Hmm.
And yeah, so yeah, that's actually a good point because at the very beginning of the story, when he first launches into Greece and up by the Danube and first across the Hellespont, money is an issue.
Yeah.
He does have to borrow some, I think he says at the
Yeah.
very
Yeah.
beginning. But he's just got endless riches from
Yeah.
this point onwards, and it gets
Yeah.
better. They get more as they go along. Well,
Yeah. The more victories he has, the more money he gets.
yeah, yeah. I mean, at Susa, there's yet another treasure. It's Xerxes's treasure, and
Mm.
and there's actually some original pieces from Athens. When Xerxes
Oh,
actually,
really?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
and they took some Athenian statues, and they're there in Susa. So Alexander sends them back to Athens.
Mental. That's
Yeah,
mental.
yeah, it's really good. It's really great.
Yeah, that's right.
And most of the locals and hill tribes around there, because that's actually quite a mountainous area. From Susa to Persepolis, there's
Yeah.
mountains like the Zagros Mountains, and most of them submit, or it doesn't take much to make them fall in line. But they're going through those mountains to Persepolis, though, is probably the last. Well, it's the last time that the Persian state, if you want to call it that,
Hmm.
actually put up some sort of proper formal defense.
Is this at the Uxian Defile?
That's it. That's exactly the
Yeah.
one. Yep.
Yeah. Yeah.
um,
So this was quite a tough one, if memory serves.
Well, yeah, it's one of the few times where Alexander is not defeated, but he's pushed back. He
Yeah.
loses like a few guys, and he has to retreat from a certain position. He goes on to encircle them, and it's a great maneuver. Again, one of those sort of textbook things that you might
Yeah.
still learn about at West Point or Sandhurst even today, of how he does it. But yeah, it's a classic Alexander sort of night march, 3 times quicker than anyone thought was possible.
Mm.
Gets round the back and reverses his fortunes. It's a great, great, great little bit.
Yeah. 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 It's interesting and good stuff. I like it. I prefer it when Alexander is forced to use his brain in battles. It's more interesting. I mean, it's obviously more heroic to just. I mean, he is using his brain in Gaugamela, obviously, to leverage the Persian army open. But like, when he's got limit, because he only has like a small body of men at this point, doesn't he? So it's like he's not with his entire forces, and so he has to think on his feet. But these engagements prove that not only is he capable of tremendous and awe-inspiring bravery, but he's actually a really smart guy and can outthink his opponents, and that's one of those interesting dimensions, I think.
Yeah, I mean, if we dive into this a little deeper, just real quick,
Yeah.
yeah, it's one of those things where Alexander's like sort of 23 for zip, and but he also did that in many, many, many different contexts and situations,
Yeah.
all different types, really. And this is one where, yeah, he has to really use his guile. Really,
Mm.
he has to split his forces up into three, and he personally goes the long way around on some really obscure sort of one abreast path through some mountains, again really quickly through the night, and another wing does something else sort of kind of extraordinary, and then they all sort of through horns, a blast of a horn, coordinate their attack at the same moment and the next morning, and yeah, it's just sort of a textbook thing where he's able to just just use the forces at his disposal expertly, just
Yeah.
perfectly, and after that they are completely surrounded and wiped out. This last sort of
Yeah.
small army before Persepolis itself is just open to the Macedonians. But no, it's a great episode again, because it shows that Alexander isn't lucky. Well, I mean,
Yeah.
he is actually lucky loads of times. But what I mean is, he doesn't rely on luck.
Yeah.
It is actual tactical
Talent. Yeah.
talent. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
I always, you know, the phrase "you make your own luck."
Mm,
I always felt that very much applied to Alexander. You know,
yeah,
like
yeah.
if he was just relying on luck, then half of this stuff wouldn't have occurred. But he sets up the scene, and he takes the initiative at every point, and so he makes it what he needs it to be.
Yeah, and I've heard people say that that may come from directly from Aristotle, where Aristotle would say, "Look, you observe things. First of all, just wait, stop, observe the thing that you don't understand or is causing you a problem,
Hmm.
and then try and understand it, and don't bring any preconceptions. Just observe the thing first. Just take a
Yeah,
minute,
yeah,
and then make come to a proper reasoned conclusion about what to do." And
yeah,
well, Alexander did that. There's no other way to be as successful as he was if
yeah.
he wasn't doing that, you know.
Totally agree. Totally agree.
So yeah, the road is open to Persepolis, which is the the real heart of the ancient Persian Empire. It's in modern day Iran, and there again, it's maybe not as grand or as huge as Babylon, but it still holds a great deal of gravitas. Should we say? There's like again giant halls with giant columns, huge or megalithic structures. Actually, it seems,
Yeah, yeah. Because this is the ancestral capital of the Persians, isn't it?
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah. It's
yeah,
their
yeah.
real heartland.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. This is in Iran. You know, this is again very old area, and yeah, it's. I mean, who was the last person to take this? You know.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't know. I don't know if it had been taken since the days of Cyrus, because at Persepolis, they get another. They marched on Persepolis so quickly, or they got round that mountain pass so efficiently that no one was able to take the treasury away, and they captured the treasury
Yeah,
intact.
yeah,
And it was basically all the treasures of Cyrus the First. Actually, they're at Pasargad, which is actually not that far from Persepolis. But anyway, they get
yeah.
another whole cache of treasure. And but we come up to the episode. I'm sure everyone knows the bit where they have another drinking bout, and Alexander is persuaded to
By some
set fire.
prostitute,
Possibly, I mean,
probably.
to set fire to the royal palace, or the royal palace complex at Persepolis, and burn it down.
Bad
Um,
form, Alex.
yeah, yeah. Well, Arian, I think it's Arian, actually says one of the few times he sort of breaks the fourth wall, so to speak, and says, "I think," he just sort of at the end
Yeah,
of
yeah,
that
yeah,
paragraph
yeah.
says, "I think this was actually quite bad policy. He probably shouldn't have done that." I think that's the line he uses: "Bad policy."
That's interesting. I see. It's been a while since I read all this stuff, so I can't remember the exact quotes. But that's interesting how he feels that he has to interject here, because it sounds like it sounds like he's getting into the narrative of Alexander, like how he's doing things correctly, and the fact that he wants to correct the reader, the event in the reader's mind, say, look, you shouldn't do this. You know, you might end up reading this and trying to emulate Alexander. If you do, just don't do this.
Yeah, it's quite hard to justify. I mean, a quick
Yeah.
word about how Arian and Curtius are quite different in the way that Curtius doesn't seem shy to shine a light on any crimes Alexander does, whereas Arian is closer to sort of a hagiography, for want of a better word. He sort of either omits some of the really bad things, or sort of tries to put a slightly
Yeah.
rosier a slant on it, a spin on it.
Spin. Yeah. Spin
Yeah,
merchant. Yeah.
yeah, and this is one of those ones where he could have been harsher in his criticism if he wanted
Mm,
to, but he just says, "I think this wasn't, really on. It wasn't really the best thing to have done."
yeah.
But I mean, Alexander's rationale for it is that you
Vengeance for the
you
Greeks. Greeks.
Yeah, you burnt and slew loads. You burnt loads of Greek
Athens.
cities. Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, you destroyed Athens. So this is what you get.
And the importance of Athens as well. The reason the Athenians are so haughty is because all of the other Greek cities have got like a foundational myth where, like, the Dorians come down and found Sparta, right? True or not, it doesn't matter. These are just the myths they tell themselves. But the Athenian one was that they're autochthonous, they're sprung from the soil, they've always been here. And it was Theseus that took all the tribes of Attica and formed out, founded Athens. So it's like they're not from somewhere else, they're from here, And so this was a point of privilege that they would, when you're talking reputation, that this is something that they would bolster their own reputation with. Whether it's also if everything's bollocks, obviously, from these narratives, but like, it meant something to them.
I
That's
mean,
why Athens is special, basically.
yeah, but I mean, it's not lost on anyone, even at the time in the ancient world, that that rationale doesn't make complete sense because because none of the Persians are alive anymore that did that to Greece. Arian says that it's like, yeah, it's sort of makes sense, but sort of is obviously nonsense as well at the same time, and that's a road.
Arian's calling out identity politics. Well, collective guilt's not on, Alexander. Come on.
And I think again, well, I said he wanted to make Babylon the capital. I think he
Yeah.
wanted to reduce Persepolis in some way,
Yeah,
uh,
yeah, yeah. The
and
prestige of it.
and the way he annihilated Thebes, it's sort of in that vein. He wants to do something making a real statement by saying, there's a new King of Kings, there's a new
Oh yeah.
Shah of Shah in town, and I'm going to do perhaps extreme things and get used to it. That's the way it's going to be. Sort of thing. But yeah, I suppose after this you get into the period of the story where Alexander is chasing down Darius. I mean,
Yes.
again, we got to the stage where he's sort of won, he's sort of completed his mission. The mission was to conquer the Persian Empire, and by getting to Persepolis and burning down the royal palace, I mean, you've got to Berlin, you've got to Tokyo.
Yeah,
You've
yeah.
done
Mission
what?
accomplished.
Yeah, mission accomplished. But Alexander, it's not too much of a jump at this stage. But his reasoning is, well, whilst Darius is out there, it's not completely
Yeah,
finished.
yeah.
I do have to do this last thing. It turns into, his adventures are only half over, really, and he has to. He at some point gets intelligence that Darius isn't a fantastic distance away, and that he Alexander does set out. It's time to
Well,
chase
he
it down.
sends out scouts looking for him and stuff like that, doesn't he?
Yeah, well, yeah, as I say, I always think of Alexander as sort of the center of this giant cloud of an
Yeah,
army.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
That occasionally Alexander is right on the raggedy edge of that army, on the cutting edge, but usually not.
Yeah.
But this is one of the stages where the chase of Darius, where he is
Yeah.
sometimes, and we're moving into sort of that stage of the narrative. He goes into sort of century Rome, up to Ecbatana and like the Caspian Gates,
Yeah.
sort of that part of the world, and it's not too long before he gets intelligence that Darius and his group are only about 5 days ride away ahead of him, and Alexander just. Well, Alexander. One of the things people say about him is his endless energy, or his ability to handle fatigue or tiredness is sort of unparalleled. And so Alexander just ups the tempo and just chases as hard as he can, just switching horses whenever one dies of exhaustion or whatever, and just keeps going. Just puts his head down, just rides hard. And well, yeah, it's over many pages. This goes on. I don't know how much detail you want to go into on it because it does go on and on. But
Well, just skip to the finding of Darius's corpse. Spoilers again.
well, in the end, but part of the people that are in his entourage are you mentioned earlier, Bezos.
Yeah.
There's a few different people. Bezos is the main one, who's sort of one of his
He seems to have
generals.
been his right hand man, or like one of them.
Yeah, and they're chased down, and eventually, after a very long chase, Alexander catches up with them, and in the confusion, they do get away briefly again. And anyway, to cut to the chase, when they're chasing them down, at some point, one of the just normal Macedonian men goes to a little river, a little oasis on by the side of the road to get some water, and he sees an abandoned wagon there, and in the back, under an old blanket or something, is the body of Darius,
Yeah.
the great king. And what had happened is that Bezos and the others had decided that now Alexander had caught them, essentially. The best thing for them to do is just to murder Darius.
They
And
don't know Alexander at all, do they? Jesus.
No, yeah, that's not
Yeah.
the way to save your own skin.
Yeah, that is actually the worst thing to do. I mean, just giving up would have been safe. He wouldn't have killed them had they just given up.
Yeah, if they'd handed Darius over to him alive, he probably
would
would have rewarded them.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Probably would have taken them on as lieutenants or something. He would have rewarded them. Undoubtedly, would have rewarded them. And so it's quite mental how they completely screw themselves.
Yeah, well, what Alexander really wanted, it seems, is, as I said earlier, is to be able to show his magnanimity, his clemency, to be able to show how great he was in victory. And they'd robbed him of that. So
they have to die now.
Yeah.
You killed my enemy, prepare to die. He hunts them down, doesn't he? He hunts them down.
Yeah, what a lot of kings or emperors throughout history are interested in is respecting the dignity of other sovereigns, because it might be them one day that's captured or whatever. And Alexander's sort of a shining example of that. But after Darius is dead, some of Alexander's men say, okay, we're done now, right? We've conquered Persia, we've got to Persepolis, Darius is dead. Yeah. And Alexander's like, no, we've got for justice, we've got to hunt down Darius's killers. And Bezos starts claiming that he's the legitimate Persian ruler, and apparently changes his name to Artaxerxes. And, well, a man like Alexander's not going to let that go. I mean, he's not going to let someone take the piss out of him like that. That's how he would have seen it. So yeah, he chases Bezos down. It's now a chase for him. One last quote I'd like to read out, if that's all right. A few lines is from Arrian, just to sum up Darius. Really, he says, quote, "His life was an unbroken series of disasters from the moment of his accession to the throne. He was immediately faced by the defeat of his satraps and their mounted troops on the Granicus. The loss of Ionia and Aeolus swiftly followed, with the two Phrygias, Lydia, and all of Caria except Halicarnassus. Soon afterwards Halicarnassus too was gone, and the whole coast as far as Cilicia. Then came his own defeat at Issus, and the bitter sight of his mother, wife, and children as prisoners in enemy hands. The loss of Phoenicia and Egypt was followed by the debacle at Arabella," that's Gaugamela, "his own shameful flight from the field, and the destruction of the mightiest army of the whole East. Then, a homeless fugitive in the land he once ruled, ruthlessly betrayed by his own guards, a monarch in chains contemptuously smuggled away from the scene of his former glory. He was finally murdered by the treachery of those most bound in duty to serve him. Such was the unhappy life of Darius." End quote.
Yeah, that really is a fantastic summary, because it's not an envious life that Darius had as the King of Kings. Like you were saying earlier, like he was relatively new to it when Alexander invaded. So it's not like if he was some grizzled old emperor, who's led many a campaign throughout his life to pacify the border tribes and blah, 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 then he probably would have fared a lot better. This is what I mean. Like everything was totally stacked in Alexander's favor, if you think about it. Because Alexander couldn't have asked for a more weak opponent. And obviously Alexander personally wouldn't have done that. But any other commander would be like, well, yeah, I would love for the opposition to be untrained, have weak men, I would love to have this, but you would stack, if you were stacking the deck in your own favor, that's how you do it. And nature, natural course of events, has stacked it in Alexander's favor almost completely in that regard.
Alexander was lucky in the time and place that he was born. He added to that luck by being so great. But Darius was given a pretty shit hand, really. The first line of that quote, he was just a string of defeats for him, basically, from the moment he ascended to the throne. I mean, that's what it seems like it was. But
Yeah.
also he had the chance to fight and die gloriously, so to speak, at Issus and Gaugamela, and opted not to. So,
Well,
I mean,
yeah,
it's
that's true.
brutal, but that's the ancient world for you, isn't it?
Well, not only that, like it's also the Persians are not they're a warlike people themselves. They're not weak, like the Greeks recognize the Persians as being great warriors. They don't think of them as being incompetent. And so like there's an expectation on Darius, however it's pronounced, to not be shit. And I mean like Alexander would have undoubtedly spared his life, I think.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I wouldn't put that beyond him. There's quite a lot of kings that
Yeah.
he or chieftains that he deposes, and then just that they're like sort of sycophantic to him, so he
Oh yeah.
reinstalls them and he
Yeah.
gives them back their lands, and they
Yeah.
become he's their suzerain lord, or however
Yeah.
you want to express it.
He would have done
Sure.
the same with Darius over the Persians. No question, I think.
Yeah. I mean,
It's a mark of humiliation, if nothing else.
yeah, well, he does that when he does. Well, so the rush to capture Bessus is a very, very long march. I mean, well, it's more than that. So he goes up into sort of modern day Afghanistan, goes up through modern Helmand province up to where modern day Kabul is, and actually founds another Alexandria just outside where modern day Kabul is. Um, and Bessus has gone across the Hindu Kush, a giant mountain range that's like a frozen sea of peaks and glaciers. And Alexander just, again, fearlessly just marches straight into it, a whole army straight across the Hindu
Like a
Kush.
maniac, yeah.
Yeah.
He is actually a maniac.
And on the other side of that is, well, the plains of modern northern Afghanistan, but it's like Bactria. And the Bactrian horsemen are sort of famed for being good, and they do sort of a hit and run style guerrilla warfare against Alexander's columns, and it's slightly more difficult to deal with than what Alexander's used to. But keep going north up to the river Oxus. That's sort of the boundary in modern day Afghanistan. North of the Oxus, you're getting into Central Asia, Uzbekistan, Tajikistan, Turkmenistan. But Bessus goes beyond that, and Alexander follows him. They cross the Oxus, and so they go up into modern day Tajikistan and Uzbekistan up to Samarkand. I mean, you're on the way to China. Samarkand's on the Silk Route. What became later in later times is the Silk Route. So he's way up there. He's way out there. This is sort of the most northern extremity of Alexander's march. But yeah, it's he's really in the back and beyond. By this point, they're up in Sogdian country. The Sogdians, they're.
It's all getting quite oriental at this point.
Yeah, they're a long way
Far
from
east,
from home.
Yeah.
they're not in Kansas anymore.
No, absolutely not. Yeah.
And up there, a few things happen up there. One, there's he gets married to one of the Bactrian
Roxana, is it?
Yeah, one of the lords is Oxyartes, and his daughter is Roxana, and he marries her. He captures the Sogdian Rock. Apparently, there's more than one rock fortress. They get described as in Arian, and the main one is the Sogdian Rock, where there's some sort of settlement on this this giant, almost unscalable mountain thing.
Yeah.
And at one point they say they're pretty confident that no one can get them, and they taunt the Macedonians by saying, if you've got soldiers that can fly, or if you can if you can send flying men, then maybe you can get us. Otherwise, two fingers up to you. But Alexander, like everything else, he's got an answer for it. He's got like 300 guys that are like climbing experts.
Well, he asks for volunteers, doesn't he?
Some volunteers, yeah, but there's also some sort of
other actual climbing experts.
Yeah, there's some sort of cadre of guys. They said, what's they say? They're from like the Macedonian uplands or something.
Right.
There's one line. It just suggests that they're great at climbing, and it's that what they describe is that they make sort of makeshift pitons out of tent pegs, and they just scale at night in the dark, scale one side of this rock, and like 30 of them die in the attempt. So it's a serious thing. But when the sun comes up the next day, Alexander's herald.
Yeah.
We
Don't
found
they surrender
flying
as well?
soldiers. Yeah, well, when they realise that there's a contingent of Macedonians on top of the rock, they just immediately immediately
He
surrender.
has
Yeah.
got fucking flying soldiers. Damn it!
Yeah. Yeah.
Who would have fucking thought? I bet one of them said, you said you had to say it, didn't you, Frank? Fuck's sake. You had to tempt fate, didn't you?
So jinxed it.
Yeah, exactly.
And it's actually Roxana is actually there. She's captured on the Sogdian Rock,
Right.
and apparently she is beautiful, the second most beautiful woman in Asia, second only to
Yeah.
Darius's wife. Um, and Alexander marries her, and again for the Macedonian contingent, that's not cool. She's
Yeah.
like a Bactrian,
Barbarian, in fact.
yeah, barbarian princess. Like you're supposed to marry a Greek woman, or a Macedonian woman, ideally, or someone from Epirus or Peloponnesia at a stretch.
Yeah, someone
Not back.
Greek, Hellenic. Yeah.
Yeah, but it speaks to that thing that Alexander's trying to. Well, he's going native a bit, isn't he?
He is
And
a globalist, isn't he?
and it's up at this stage of the adventure where, well, I feel that he goes across the Hindu Kush as one guy, and when he comes back across the Hindu Kush, he comes back the way he came. Something's changed because he's married Roxana.
Yeah.
He's adopted much more Persian dress. He started to ask Macedonians to kneel before him and things like, or prostrate themselves before him. Literally lay on the floor face first. Before him, and other bits and bobs like that, and it's really not cool. I mean, so this is when the first proper dissension seems to show itself. First of all,
it's all gone to his head by this point.
Yeah, he seems to be suffering from the first sort of megalomania, maybe, or just that his ego, I suppose. It's horrible to use these modern words, but his ego's getting a bit out of control. There's not enough people around telling him no, basically.
But then, I mean, would you expect any different given the circumstances? I mean, he does seem to have achieved that kind of status where, I mean, what are you going to say? You're not good enough? Like, I mean, he seems to, I'm the best in all of human history up until this point. What? Like no one has ever conquered anything like I've conquered. So it's easy to see why his ego would get out of control. Because I mean, like, whatever great epithets he wants to ascribe to himself, they're probably true to some degree.
Yeah, I mean, it's incredible that he hasn't gone completely stir crazy before now.
Yeah.
There's lots of people, even just maybe modern day sports stars, who's just the best of the best in their time.
Yeah.
Like Federer or Sampras or
Conor
Schumacher.
McGregor.
Or Lewis Hamilton or something. It'd be very difficult. You're constantly told you're the best, and the stats
and you
prove that to
win.
be true.
Yeah.
And it's like, how do you keep a handle on that? It must be very, very difficult. And in the highest stakes, life and death, we're not just talking about sport. We're talking about controlling the world, becoming conqueror of more or less the known world. To not go insane is straight way is something quite special.
I'm the king of kings. It's like, well, yeah, but have you considered your ego? It's like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? King of kings. What about that? Don't you understand? Son of Zeus, conqueror of the Persian Empire. Like, what are you not getting here?
How harder do I have to ram this home?
Exactly. What else do I have to conquer until you say, okay, maybe that's true, But like you say, the Macedonians don't like it.
Yeah, and one other thing, just to say quickly at this point, is that one of the extremities of his march is that when they get to the Caspian Sea and when they get beyond the Oxus up there by Samarkand and stuff, their perception of the world was that they were at the very limits of the world. They didn't know or didn't think that the Caspian Sea was a landlocked sea. They thought it had access to the great ocean that surrounded the world. You could sail up the Caspian, turn left and go to Europe, or turn right and go to India. Of course, that's not the case. The world's much bigger, but they didn't know that. And the same goes for when they were up there near Samarkand. They thought there was a little bit of Sogdia left, and then you would reach, or Scythia, a little bit of Scythian territory left, and then you'd reach the grand ocean that surrounds the world. So he's basically conquering the world, the known world.
Did they find out the hard way? Like, imagine how many thousands of miles they've marched at this point. It's like, are we at the end of the world yet? No. In fact, it looks like it goes on way more. Fuck. Yeah. And what? No, but that's the worst news. Oh, fuck's sake! Just tell him we're at the end of the world so we can go home. Like he's not going to stop if he thinks we're just halfway. He's going to keep going.
Yeah. I mean, well, there's a couple of other things happen beyond the Hindu Kush that are of note. One of them is that Alexander becomes steps up his the tyrannical nature of his rule.
Mm.
It hasn't been too bad until this point, but he's executing more people. I mean, there's the conspiracy of Philotas. Now,
Yeah.
Philotas was Parmenio's son. Parmenio is that old hand who was Philip's right-hand man. He's one of Alexander's greatest generals, and Philotas is his son, who's also one of the best generals, one of the most senior generals that Alexander grew up with. But Alexander gets reports that Philotas is possibly plotting against Alexander, or certainly resents Alexander by this stage, and possibly he failed to report that there was a coup being plotted against Alexander. And anyway, Alexander decides that this is enough he's going to have to order Philotas's execution without trial or anything. And that's not really on. And that's one thing in and of itself. But Alexander also decides that he's going to have to order Parmenio's execution as well, because it would mean that Parmenio would have some sort of blood feud against Alexander. He couldn't, and so to nip that in the bud, Alexander decides that he's got to send a kill team to Parmenio as well. And Parmenio's really is one of the cornerstones of the whole thing.
Yeah. I mean, what's he even done wrong? He's done nothing wrong.
Yeah, he's personally done nothing wrong apart from be endlessly loyal and brilliant.
Sorry, Alex. But it's really cruel, you know.
And it's again, everyone at the time realizes this is bang out of order, you know. Yeah. Not many people say, "Oh no, fair enough," though.
Yeah.
That's way harsh. And there's I think Curtius says that he has Philotas tortured as well, which doesn't seem necessary.
No. Yeah, he's definitely losing it at this point, isn't he? Christ.
Yeah, and then there's the bit with Clytus, where
he stabs him with a spear.
Clytus is one of the old guard as well, like one of.
Well, he's the one at the Granicus who saves him from Mithridates, whatever it is. You know, Clytus is the one who drives him through the spear and saves him from being killed. So, like, this is the thing. This is why that's a relevant part of assuming that existed. That's why it's relevant. It's because Alexander's turning on his closest people now. You know, he's turned into a proper.
No, Clytus is like, Clytus is one of the old guard, and he grew up with him. You know, and apparently what it is, again, another drinking bout, and Alexander is apparently talking shit about Philip, like how he didn't really owe all that much to Philip, and everything he's achieved is off his own back and things.
Yeah, and that's not true, Alex. Where did you get the army from?
Yeah. Well, Clytus can't help himself and just pipes up and goes, like, that's bullshit, man. Like, you owe nearly everything to Philip. Come on, like.
Yeah.
And Alexander's enraged, and like, and in the end, like, Clytus's mates sort of drag him out of the room, and I imagine, like, you know, when people try and start on a bouncer outside a club, and his mates drag him away. It's not worth it, Dave. It's not worth it.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
And they actually do get him out of the palace or whatever, and then it's a bit like a movie in Arian anyway. Suddenly Clytus just bursts in through another door, and just goes, "I'm here, Alexander!" Like, it just tries to carry the conversation, the argument on.
Yeah, a bit like a movie, a bit like EastEnders, mate. That's more like EastEnders or Coronation Street. Like this would be terrible writing.
Yeah, they've laid it on a bit thick.
They really did. Like, oh, I mean, come on, this. But no, but think about it. It's like, oh, you owe, I owe nothing to Philip. Yes, you do owe something to Philip. That's right, I'll fight you about it. Oh, I'm here. And it's like, calm down, lads. Like, what would Aristotle say, Alex? Come on.
Yeah, and at that point, Alexander, there's only so far you can push Alexander, and he just runs him through. I think with a spear or a javelin, just grabs one off a guard standing nearby and just runs him through and kills him. And apparently he's immediately terribly upset. I mean,
racked with guilt for days on end.
Crying for 2 or 3 days on end, and inconsolable, and and so that's one of the things about Alexander's character, where some people want to paint him as just sort of a devil, a monster, psychopath. He knows right from wrong. He might do the wrong thing sometimes, but he knows right from wrong. So I don't think you could say he's a psychopath in the sense that he's unable to empathize or anything like that
No,
at all.
he's a hugely emotional person. That's the
If
thing.
anything, yeah.
He's controlled by his emotions. That's the problem,
Yeah.
And it can be very powerful when he's on a battlefield and he's like, right, I'm just going to go in. And I don't give a shit. I'm going to kill everything. It's a very powerful thing. Then it's also a very powerful thing when he's having an argument with one of his oldest friends. And so yeah, he's just a hugely emotional person.
I couldn't agree more. There's loads of examples of it. I mean, he's brought to tears by. Well, that's the thing in the ancient world. Like Achilles often cries.
Oh yeah,
at kings.
manly tears, definitely.
Yeah, yeah. It's up there again, up in the Bactrian Sogdian period. Alexander gets another wound in the leg, one of the more bad ones. But he does survive it. And when they do eventually catch Bessus, I think it might be who was it? It might be Perdiccas or someone. They send a letter back to Alexander saying, "We got him, we got him."
Yeah.
And how do you want to sort of meet him? How do you want him to be presented to you? And Alexander says, strip him naked, put him in some sort of collar, dog collar, and walk him along the side of the road. And I'm just going to come across him as though I'm just on my way, and he just happens to be by the side of the road. That's how I want to do it. And they do, and at some point he comes along, and Bessus is being walked along the side of the road in this collar, and Alexander says, like, "You there, you man, what do you think you were playing at, killing Darius?" And he just says, like, "Oh, well, we just thought it wasn't just me, by the way. we all thought it would be the best. We thought it's what you wanted. We thought it would be the best thing to do." And Alexander's obviously like, "Well, you were wrong," and he cuts off his nose and ears and sends him back to Iran to be crucified.
Jesus.
So yeah, that's what you get if you wrong Alexander.
Yeah, but that's the thing. Don't sit there and think rationally. Think like in terms of fairy tales and stories when dealing with Alexander. Like what would Alexander find like interesting in a fairy tale way? Do that. That's how you'll be safe.
And I suppose one last thing, just one last episode to mention that's up in the beyond the Hindu Kush there in sort of Central Asia, northern Afghanistan, is Callisthenes. He was one of the meant to be the official chroniclers or biographers as it goes on. He's sort of caught out or implicated in another plot or coup against Alexander.
The biographer.
Yeah.
Okay, where do you think you're going? All right.
There's some sort of page boys plot, and he is executed in that. And anyway, it's just one more example of where Alexander is prepared just to do sort of extrajudicial killings, for want of a better way of explaining it. So yeah, I suppose we'll just carry on. He has to draw, work his way back across the Oxus, back through the Hindu Kush, and then this time cutting east across the Khyber Pass.
Yeah.
The famous Khyber Pass that so many armies through the ages have had to go through. Like, well, we said it in one of the other videos, didn't we? There's certain choke points in the world where if you want to lead an army, you're almost certainly going to have to go through these specific places, and the Khyber Pass is a great example of one of those.
Yeah.
I mean, the British Army went through in the 1880s under General Roberts, General Bobs.
And
go the other way.
Yeah, like you say, there were loads of these. There were loads of battles fought at Thermopylae. It's just that after the Persians had gone through them, everyone knew there was a way around. So it was kind of silly to fight there. And then, like the Alpine passes going into the north of Italy, like over the centuries, so many different armies have gone through them. It's famous places.
Yeah, and so you head down when you come through the Khyber Pass, you head down into sort of the Punjab, modern day Pakistan, when they called it India. You were in India at that point, and once you cross some of the Punjab was like the 5 big rivers, the land of 5 rivers, the 5 great tributaries really that all end up leading into the Indus, in the great Indus River, the second biggest. River in India other than the Ganges, and like the Indus Valley, which is in modern day Pakistan almost entirely, and so yeah, there's this whole stage, and this is like the most eastern stage of the whole thing, and again, there's much more serious rumblings at this point. It was like, at what point are we going to get to go home or even head home? Because this is getting a bit crazy now. I mean, heading beyond the Hindu Kush was kind of a crazy expedition in and of
Yeah.
itself. But
The point being that Alexander's men thought the world ended like 500 miles previously. So it's like, what are we even doing out here now? What's the goal?
yeah, so the goal is, or Alexander now has decided, the goal is to conquer the world or the
Yeah,
known world.
exactly.
And
Yeah.
and once again, as I said with the
But we don't know
Caspian,
this part of the
or
world. Well, we're going to conquer it
yeah,
anyway.
yeah.
Yeah.
Strabo the geographer is often quoted as one of the sort of lesser, the sort of Pliny the Elder and
Yeah.
Cicero does some writings about Alexander, but the accounts of Nearchus the admiral. But yeah, Strabo the geographer talks a bit about where the edge of the world is, or where they think it should be, and all that sort of thing. And they thought that India, or Aristotle apparently taught Alexander that India was sort of quite a short sort of promontory that stuck out into the great ocean that bounded the world. And so if you went much beyond the Indus, you would again be at the end of the world. And so from Alexander's point of view, it was probably hopefully only a few more weeks march or whatever, and they'd reached the sea. And but anyway, he sends Hephaestion forward to make bridges across these many rivers they have to cross. One of the first main ones, big ones, huge ones that they come to is the Hydaspes, and he has a big battle with Porus, who is the one of the great Indian, or the biggest sort of Indian warlord in that area, and they have a big.
I think it's important to note
battle.
that we're skipping over a lot of military action
Yeah.
in this telling here because
Yeah.
because these are parts of the world that weren't under the Persians, so these were not under the Persian Empire, and so like when you're saying like all these hill forts and stuff like this, these these are all stormed by Alexander along the way. There are various like regional rulers who Alexander is defeating, and in this area of the world, he often lets them keep their thrones. Because he doesn't know anything about it. Why would he care? But they've essentially got to pay him fealty. But yeah, so just to let people know, we're skipping over quite again. It's non-stop fighting, really.
Yeah, it really is. He made a really good point, and exactly right, that none of them roll over for him just because he is who
Yeah,
he is.
yeah,
And so Porus, this Indian warlord, gets together a big army. There's really, Alexander might have won 23 battles, but there's only really 4 really big ones.
yeah,
But on this river, the Hydaspes, it's the 4th giant battle he has, and apparently Porus has got hundreds of war elephants.
yeah.
And it's a big one again. And in the monsoon season, it's bloody tough. It sounds like, but the Macedonians are used to war elephants these days. They're well versed in how to deal with war elephant.
Yeah.
Um,
1,000
and,
chariots, according to Wikipedia. It's like chariots. God, they're not worth it.
chariots again.
Yeah.
And in the end, he does defeat Porus at that battle. But he comes before him and he says, "Is there anything I can give you?" And apparently Porus says something like, "All I ask is that you treat me as a king," or a line along those lines. And Alexander goes, "Oh, all right then. Yeah, you can have all your lands back."
Exactly. No, but think about that, right? He fights nobly, gets defeated, gets captured, and then he's like speaking to the dignity of his office. It's like, well, treat me as an equal. We're both kings. Treat me like king. And he's like, well, here's all your stuff. Then it's like, that look, why?
Yeah.
But it fits into the romantic narrative of like there's something greater that Alexander is trying to do here.
Yeah, I mean, so Alexander will be the overlord, the king of kings, and Porus will just be one of the client kings, if you like. Again, that's not really the correct terminology, but he, as long as he bends the knee, as long as he'll bend the knee for Alexander, then that's okay. That's enough.
He literally.
And
He's
so
clement if you just play the role. That's the thing. It's so weird.
so they keep going and they keep crossing these rivers. They don't know how many there's going to be. But in the end, they get to like the Hyphasis, the river Hyphasis, or modern day known as Bias River. And this is the point. This is like the turning point where the men finally
This is the
revolt, if you like. And you could describe it on one end of the spectrum as a full blown mutiny, and on the other, I've heard it as just simply like a sit-in. Not much more than a sit-in.
Well,
But
yeah, but what's interesting is that nothing's ever like this has happened before. Like never before have they been like, "Oh, Alexander, we think this is a bad idea. We're not going over here." Blah 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 blah. And now, so I mean, what are you gonna do, Alex? How you're gonna make them bow the knee, bend the knee as well? Are you? Mm-hmm.
yeah, well, I mean, he says it's his first and only real defeat ever,
Yeah,
really.
yeah,
Proper defeat where it's his will
yeah,
versus others, and
yes,
he doesn't prevail. So yeah, on the banks of the Hyphasis, he says, "Come on, we've only got a little bit of land left before we reach the ocean, and we're right near conquering the whole world. Come on, guys!" And they're like, "No, look, first of all, you said we're going to liberate the Ionian coast. Then it was we're going to conquer all of Persia. Then it's we're going to hunt down Darius. Then it's going to hunt down Darius's killers, and now it's the
yeah,
whole world. No,
yeah,
they basically say, look, we got respect for you still, but we would rather die at your hand. We'd rather be executed by you for insubordination than go any further." And
oof,
Alexander Alexander just has a temper tantrum and
yeah,
just sulks for 2 or 3 days in his tent. There's sort of a test of wills, like a blinking match.
yeah, yeah,
Um, and he sort of expects his men to come to him and say, "Oh, okay, sorry," like they always did.
yeah.
We'll carry on, and they don't. No one does come to him.
See, Julius Caesar handled this way better. Like Julius Caesar guilt tripped his army and made them feel like they were disappointing him, and so they all threw themselves at his feet and go, "Oh, okay, yeah, yeah, we'll do it, we'll do it." With Alexander, he just sulks like a child and fucks it up.
Well, in the end, again, the reality you can only really
Yeah, I know.
infer. Must have been that um, uh, uh, the men were just really super serious, and that Alexander
Oh
was
yeah.
staring down the barrel of having to execute the few remaining Macedonians or Greeks he's got left.
How many of them can I execute to get my way?
Yeah, and, and
Yeah,
and sort of it decides that he's not going to do it. The story goes that he decides to take a divination from some of his seers or whatever,
mm.
and in the birds or the liver of a lamb or whatever it is, and they decide that it's not in Alexander's favor, and Alexander's able to use that to save some face to say, "Oh, okay, the gods do want me to turn back. We
Yeah,
will." And yeah, and that marks the most eastern limit of the Alexandrian campaign, and
it's like
it's a turning point
3,000
in his
miles
life.
to the east. It's really far.
Yeah, crazily far. Yeah.
Yeah,
So yeah, now it's the homeward stretch, and so what he decides to do is sail down the Indus or the Hyphasis, and then into the Indus, and Arian goes on and on and on about rivers for a few pages about
yeah,
how the Indus is greater than the Danube, but it's not as great
yeah,
as the
yeah.
Ganges, and it's like, okay, I get it, Arian. I don't need
Yeah,
another
no,
couple of
no.
pages on that, but
This is really interesting though, because um he seems very. I remember this bit. He's very focused on the geography of it, and I assume it's because it's so unusual. It's look, this is going to be important stuff for people who are never going to go anywhere near that to have some understanding. So it seems boring, but if you put it in the context, like this might be really relevant to a lot of people. Very interesting to know. Like this is genuine education here.
oh yeah, for sure, and it's sort of showing off his knowledge as well because
Yeah, yeah,
Arian's writing in like the 160s, maybe 170s AD, and yeah, he's showing that we Romans know so much more than
yeah,
they did back then, sort of thing.
yeah.
He's sort of showing off. He mentions that he's going to write another book all about India, and he says it 3 or 4 times. He goes, "Oh, I'll stop going on about this now, but in my book about India, I'm going to go on about it loads more." So,
Yeah,
so look out for that.
yeah.
But
But the thing is, like, you wouldn't have known this if it wasn't for Alexander, would you?
yeah, well, quite right. Good point. Yeah.
So they go, well, you know so much more. Well, why? You know?
So Alexander decides to sort of commission 1,000 boats to be built, which is probably
Yeah,
an exaggeration. And they're all going to sail down the Indus, and they do. And apparently, again, it's another example that on the way, not really anyone capitulates for them.
mm,
It's sort of fighting all the way
yeah,
down. And the next main episode that you kind of have to mention is that there's uh, what they call the Mali. There's like the Mali people what they're called, and there's a big siege there that Alexander has.
Yeah.
And that's the one where they're besieging this town, and they're more or less broken in. They're nearly broken in, and or on one side of the town they have already broken in, and on the other side is where Alexander is, and he's pissed off that his side hasn't already got in, and he runs out of patience, and he grabs a ladder, a siege ladder, off of someone, and puts it against the wall and runs up it himself.
He gets wounded here, doesn't he? Like badly
Badly,
wounded.
yeah.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
he runs up it, and his men see him doing that, and they're like, "Oh fuck, shit!" Like, and so three other guys run up the ladder directly after him, and so him and three other guys, four guys, are on top of the wall, and so many more are trying to climb up the ladder that the ladder breaks.
Oh no.
And so Alexander and three other dudes are left on top of this wall on their own, and to the horror of the Macedonians, Alexander just leaps down into the town, and it's like, what the fuck have I just seen? That didn't happen. This
maniac.
is not yeah. It's like, this is not happening. No way. And they sort of lose their minds. They go into some sort of frenzied panic. And the other three guys jump down with him and protect him. One of them dies immediately. But yeah, Alexander gets shot with an arrow, and it goes it's not clear exactly, but it's somewhere above the chest. It maybe have gone in on his flank or just below the armpit or something like that. But he gets shot in the chest or the flank, and it seems like it punctured his lung. And he's like, I think he nearly passes out, or he passes out, and he's like frothing. There's tons of blood, and it's really bad. And one of his, I can't remember who it is, but someone important shields him with the shield of Achilles that they took from Troy. Again, it's all a bit perfect, isn't it? But eventually the men get in, and he is saved. But he's on death. I mean, he's really. This is a mortal wound, quite possibly, you know. And it looks like he's going to die. But they've got a great doctor. He was the son. Apparently, this doctor was the son of the doctor that took the arrow out of Philip's eye. You know, famously, Philip of Macedon only had one eye. Yes. And there's a real art to taking an arrow out. You know, you don't just rip it out. Anyway, he had a good doctor, and they was able to take out.
This is actually quite an eternal thing. The death of Richard the Lionheart is the example here. He gets shot like near the neck, not in the neck, but like in the shoulder or something, with a crossbow bolt. And the complaint is that the doctor mangles taking it out. I can't remember the exact terminology, but it's one of those sort of like, you know, he's a butcher or something they call him. You know, as he's taking this arrow out, and stuff like this. So it's, you know, really, really, it is a very important skill to be able to extract arrows without doing extra damage.
God, absolutely. And there's also that thing of infection, where I think the Lionheart got infected. It got blood poisoning, possibly something like that. I wasn't sure if it was the wound itself.
I don't think it's clear.
Didn't it slowly fester? I mean, I think he knew he was dying for many days.
But it could have been the damage done to the wound itself. So it's unclear, if I recall correctly.
But for Alexander to have a punctured lung and to just recover from that wound at all, but to not get an infection or blood poisoning or anything, it's just miraculous, really. But where he, as a younger man, because he's now like 29, 30 odd, so he's young still, sort of, but he's not a 22-year-old. You know, he's put his body through a heap, and it's beginning to show. And I think in many ways he never fully recovered, fully recovered from that one. Like that was a biggie. That was his worst wound.
But notice how that's his most crazy thing to do as well. Like, you know, out of impatience, just 4 guys up a ladder and then jumping into the town. It's like, what are you doing? You know better than this.
Well, it might be like, and you said suicide by cop, but you know what I mean. It might be like he's almost seeking a glorious battlefield death, almost. Could be, maybe. Could be. I mean, who knows? But
I wouldn't rule it out. I definitely wouldn't rule it out.
So his men, people think he's going to die for sure, and a lot of the army do think he is dead. And a few days later, they're able to sort of display him on a barge. And the army are able to see that he isn't dead, and they're sort of elated. Because at that point, they think they're going to find themselves in a Xenophon type situation. with Alexander's dead, and they're suddenly in the middle of enemy territory
Yeah. What
without
are we doing here
you know,
again?
yeah, leaderless, and
Yeah,
yeah.
again.
But yeah, so but he doesn't die, and they go down the river and they make it to sort of the Indus River delta again. That sort of opens out into a delta, and he goes down one delta and then another, and explores out into the ocean a bit, and but ultimately starts heading in the direction of the setting sun, i.e. back west, and one of the things that he does is he decides at this point to split his force. A lot of the army can go on ship with Nearchus along that part of the sort of southern coast of Afghanistan and Iran, and he takes a lot of the army, most of the foot army, inland
Through
across
the
the land,
Gadrosian Desert.
the Gadrosian wastes. Yeah,
Yes.
this
The,
bit of desert, this unbelievably inhospitable
yes.
desert.
So what is his reason that you have there? Because there are conspiracy theories about this. The reason that he would choose to do this, and one
Mm.
of them is that he's doing it to get back at his army for betraying him in for revolting against him in India. How do you feel
Yeah,
about that?
punishing them. Yeah,
Yeah.
punishing them in a way. Yeah. Well, that might have ended up being the case. See, so what happens was the idea was that originally Alexander was going to take the army a little bit inland and then cut south and meet up with the navy.
Hmm.
And he apparently never planned to go through the Gedrosian desert. But then when he does get to the coast, the navy is nowhere to be seen. They don't rendezvous.
Hmm.
Uh, now, of course, we're used to a world where that's no kind of problem. But if in the age before any sort of decent communications, if you don't rendezvous, you don't
Yeah, where the
rendezvous.
fuck are
That's
they?
it. That's the
Yeah.
end of the story. You now have to make your own way. And so,
Yeah, yeah.
and so he decides. Well, his options at that point are either to go back the way he came and head back towards the Indus Valley and sort of make a new plan, or just head on westwards, even if that means into an inhospitable desert.
Yeah.
And people said the psychology of Alexander is that he was never going to go backwards. Like
Yeah.
that's his thing. He's the quintessential always
Yeah.
move forward guy.
Yeah.
But going through the Gedrosian wastes, it's like 60 days. I
Yeah.
mean, they say that maybe he led 80 to 100,000 people into there, and maybe only 25% came out.
Yeah.
Probably those numbers, both of those figures are exaggerated. But whatever happens, tons of people died.
Yeah,
Loads of people died
it's
of exposure.
totally feasible because it is just barren, absolutely barren. There's no water and all this sort of stuff. They have to eat their horses, and it's like, oh god, it's
Yeah.
horrific, isn't it?
Or at one point, Arian describes a flash flood, which apparently is really common there, and loads of people, thousands of people, are swept away.
Jesus.
Like, okay, and then yeah, just loads of people die of thirst. And
Yeah.
there's one story that it probably has to be mentioned, sort of up there with the Gordian knot, where some men are able to find just one helmet's worth, one
Yes.
upturned helmet's worth
Yes.
of water from some little local stream, dried up stream or something, and they give it to Alexander, and Alexander, before the army, just pours it out onto the ground. If you guys can't drink, I'm not going to drink. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
it, it does put me in mind of the Three Amigos. I don't know if you've seen that when they're
No.
in the desert and uh, one of them's got a completely empty water bottle, the other one seems to be full of sand, and the third one's just completely full of water, and he just sort of gargles a bit and throws the rest away. It's a joke, but I
Right. Yeah.
always
Yeah.
think, Alexandra, it's a good point you're making, a good symbolic point to throw that water away, but don't throw it away. At least give it to someone.
Yeah. Give it to one of the
I,
other men, Alex.
yeah, yeah, I
Yeah.
get the point you're making, but come on.
It is very symbolic. You're right. But the men are just watching this water soap into the sand, thinking, "Fuck's sake." His flair from the dramatic is just, it's going to get us all killed.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. But even though loads of them die, and it seems like it's a real,
Yeah.
they're in a proper survival situation, and that Alexander himself could even easily
Oh, yeah.
die, and every day that they set off on a new day's march, they're just leaving people behind.
Yeah.
And one line from someone or other says, "When you leave them behind, it's like you're leaving people lost at sea." That's effectively how lost they are.
Yeah.
Terrible, horrible thing. But
Yeah.
So but eventually he makes it to Pasargad, which isn't that far from Persepolis, and they're able to eventually rendezvous with the rest of the army. And at that point, when he gets back to civilization, if you like, um, there's another sort of wave of Alexander ordering executions of.
Yeah.
They're probably more just, these ones, that any administrator, whether he was a Greek, Macedonian, or a Persian that he left in control, if any of them have been unjust or needlessly cruel or anything like that, he has them removed and or executed. So although he's acting tyrannically, it actually seems to be for the greater good in this instance.
Yeah.
But,
He definitely has a sense of cosmic justice, doesn't he? You know.
yeah, it's around this, comes across the tomb of Cyrus the Great.
Right. Yeah.
And it's all looted and half destroyed, and Alexander is outraged again that this sort of the dignity for sovereigns is important to him, and he has some people tortured and executed who should have been looking after it, and has it completely restored to how it should have been. And anyway, it's a nice couple of paragraphs in Arian. I like. And then and he moves on to Persepolis, and at this point you get Alexander being really upset and contrite about when he burnt down the royal palace complex all those years ago, and really wishing he hadn't have done that. And again, you realise that Alexander, isn't a psychopath. No. I often think with figures in history, a way to judge them in some ways. Would you feel comfortable sitting down with a drink with them, or for dinner with them?
As long as he didn't have a spear handy, maybe.
Well, yeah, I mean, for me, Alexander is on the cusp, probably one I wouldn't feel that comfortable with. Like sitting down with Charles I or Tony Blair. Yeah, fine.
God,
sitting down with well, I don't fear he's going to run me through, but sitting down with Attila the Hun or Stalin, I'd be petrified. I'd be terrified every single second.
Stalin, obviously, yes. The thing is, Attila the Hun, I don't know. I'm not like. The thing with a lot of these sort of barbarian warlord types is not that they're necessarily personally dangerous or unhinged, like in a social setting. The problem is they'll just order the destruction of a city and the slavery and killing of everyone in there, right? Because that's where like Alexander. I don't think. I mean, is he ever just killed a random stranger in his court? I don't think there's any example of that.
No.
So I don't see why you would need to be afraid of him like that. Like the issue with Cletus, sorry, was clearly an emotional thing for him. He was clearly having an episode, but like that's not something you'll ever be involved in with him, is it? So if he's entertaining you like a guest, I don't think you're in any danger of him.
No, it's a fair point. Like I say, he's just on the cusp of where I wouldn't feel comfortable. But no, you're quite right. I don't think he didn't. He never went around just arbitrarily ordering people to be strung up by a piano wire, or just or wanting a list of people. It doesn't matter who they are. Like Stalin, for example. But at the same point, if you did say something off, I'd be worried. But then
I suppose you'd be cautious, wouldn't you?
Yeah, I personally wouldn't be goading Alexander.
No, God no. I mean, this is the thing. Like even if he's a physically intimidating man. He's capable of killing you with his actual hands. That's what he does. He goes around killing people all day on a battlefield. He loves getting in the thing. So I'm just gonna be something on the wall. I'm not going to challenge him to a fight. Like Jesus, this guy's gonna kick my ass.
Yeah. I mean, so there's a few bits getting towards the end of Alexander's life, really, because like Achilles, it's almost like he chose to burn brightly and die young. Yes. It's almost like that, and there's lots of people, like I don't know, maybe John Lennon. You're sort of you're forever young. You're spared the indignity of an old age or defeat in any way.
By dying young.
And a lot of, I think a lot of the stories or the anecdotes from about this point forward are really tainted by what we know happens. and that
Yes.
they seem a bit too perfect. Like, for example, there's accounts where Alexander, in a bit different in Curtius and Arrian and Plutarch, but where he says, "Oh, I plan to go into the Arabian Peninsula and conquer all of that,
Yeah.
or I plan to
North
sail around all of
Africa and
Africa.
yeah.
Yeah, I want to circumnavigate Africa, or
Yeah.
one day I'm going to go up to the Black Sea and conquer all around there, or I'm going to go over to Italy
Sure.
and conquer what we know of Europe."
Again,
And
like Julius Caesar being like, I'll go conquer Parthia and then circle back through the north of Europe and then I'll have conquered it all. It's like, yeah, okay.
good luck with that.
Yeah.
We get loads of things like apparently loads of delegates from all over the remainder of the known world all came to him and pledged him fealty
Yeah.
in like the month before he died. It's like, yeah, that probably didn't happen though, did it?
Yeah. Why would they?
And you get a few more details about different things that people said to him. Like, for example, it's this point in Arrian where he gives a couple of anecdotes where people were critical or rude to Alexander. Like there's some guy who actually said to Alexander apparently that, quote, "You're a nuisance to yourself and others," and
True, yeah.
and that once you're dead, the only land you're going to own is that small bit of ground that you're in. Reminding him that owning empires and land is
Yeah.
there's hubris attached to that.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
you would have thought that maybe Alexander would run a man through for saying something like that, maybe, but he doesn't. He's like, good point, yeah, no, fair enough.
Well, again, it depends on the mood in which you catch
Yeah,
him.
absolutely.
Yeah.
And there's that one Diogenes of Syracuse
Sinope, yeah.
who,
Yeah.
who's well, you must know the story.
Is there anything you want from me? Yeah, I'd like you to move out of my son. And then Alexander walks off going, you know what? If I wasn't Alexander, I'd be Diogenes.
Yeah. I love that though.
It's great, yeah.
It's like you open your eyes and you're like, oh, it's Alexander the Great. Yeah, just get out of my son, bitch.
Yeah. But
I
Diogenes,
love
the famous cynic, doesn't give a shit about anything. Yeah.
I love the idea that you might be sunbathing in like Green Park or something like that, and just randomly, somehow, like Donald Trump or Putin or Prince Charles, walks up to you with a camera crew and says, what do you do or how are you? And you're just like, get out of my son. I just think it's great. Yeah.
Yeah, it is. Diogenes is an amazing character in his own right. I mean, like, he used to eat with the dogs and masturbate in public. So, like, I guess Alexander caught him at a good time.
There's one little story which I suppose I have to sort of mention just real quick is a guy called Coriolanus, I think it is, where he isn't a really old guy, really infirmed, can almost barely move from being so sort of old and diseased, and he decides he's going to die by sort of a live immolation, sort of climb on a funeral pyre, whilst alive and conscious, and have it lit beneath him. And
I don't remember.
And there's a whole there's a whole description of this in Arrian, and that Alexander and all his men sort of aghast, sort of can't believe how brilliant and disgusting it is all at the same time. And I mean, anyway, there's a fair few pages about that, and most historians sort of have some sort of comment on that, on that little bit. So I thought I'd mention it, but it's kind of a bit weird, but.
Yeah, I don't remember that bit offhand, but that's what I mean. Like, what the hell can you even say?
Yeah, and apparently the guy didn't scream or cry or shout or anything as he was being consumed by the flames. It's like there's that horrible footage of one of those Buddhist monks in Vietnam in the 60s of setting himself alight and doing it in silence. It's incredible. I mean, really incredible, almost beyond superhuman, isn't it?
Oh yeah, it's staggering.
But I suppose we're getting towards his death, really. I mean, one of the main few episodes I suppose we've missed out a bit is where he goes through again another sort of a minor mutiny from his men, and they say, we don't want to prostrate ourselves before you anymore. And they fall out for a few days, and Alexander starts appointing Persians to be his top generals, and they're sort of reconciled. But so death then. So he gets back to Babylon, and again all all the signs from the birds or the gods say that don't enter Babylon. Something
Yeah.
terrible will happen to you in Babylon, which again is just too perfect, really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it seems that he had a big drinking bout with one of his old friends, and yet another drinking bout deep into the night and the next day,
Yeah.
uh, and catches some sort of a fever. I think it's just mainly described as that, a fever,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it just gets worse and worse and worse, and he doesn't fight it off. And this is one of the times when it seems that his secretary Eumenes, who becomes a really important figure after his death, Eumenes has got Plutarch does a life of him, so he's quite important. And anyway, he was one of Alexander's closest secretaries by this stage, the end of Alexander's life. And apparently his diaries, day-to-day account, survived into the times of Arrian and Plutarch.
Oh wow.
And Curtius. So yeah, so they had it. So their accounts are almost identical because they're just using, like, on this day, on this Friday, he
Right.
had a bath and did some sacrifices and retired, played a little dice, and that was it.
Yeah.
And then the next day was a bit worse, and so on and so on.
Yeah.
And eventually, after about a week of it slowly getting worse, it becomes clear he's going to die. It becomes clear that well, his body is basically broken and destroyed. He's burnt so brightly.
Yeah. He's
It
fucked
seems like
himself
his
up.
spirit, and yeah, and he's also Hephaestion. I forgot to say that, but Hephaestion, his closest friend, has died not too
Yeah.
long ago, and it seems that Alexander was a little bit broken in spirit or soul by a grief, and well, there's that thing, the loneliness of absolute power as well,
Mm.
and probably some form of insanity from megalomania, probably
Yeah.
some all sorts of things, all sorts of psychological maladies going on, and his body is just done. So yeah, eventually he loses the power to speak. Even just before that, they say, "Who do you want to succeed you?" Because he's got a tiny little
Yes.
baby son, and Roxana's pregnant, but she hasn't even given birth. And they say, "Who do you want to succeed us?" And he just says, "The best among you," or something like that,
Well,
which
that's
doesn't
the
help.
question.
Doesn't even
That's
mean
the
anything.
question. No. I think it was it sounded like he either said Craterus, who was one of the generals, or the strongest, but Craterus sounds like strong. Kratos being power and strength in Greek. So it's like it's hard to tell, and apparently I thought that was the source of the confusion. I was under that impression anyway.
Oh, it could be. I mean, yeah. I mean, whatever happened, the succession
Yeah.
wasn't written in stone.
No.
Because I'm sure, well, I know, as you well know, the period directly after Alexander's death is just a clusterfuck of civil wars for like two
Yeah.
straight generations. It's
Yeah.
mad. It really is mad. Crazy.
Yeah. And huge
Which,
as well. Huge, like
yeah.
epic scale, all across the conquest of Alexander. Like everyone's then fighting for bits of it, and it becomes like hundreds of years of successor wars.
Yeah,
Until the
yeah.
Romans turn up.
And to use a really, really broad stroke of the brush here, but it's really only Ptolemy and Seleucid that make a go of it, really.
Yeah.
And out of
No,
those,
you're right.
it's the Ptolemaic dynasty that actually is the only one that lasts
Yeah.
for any significant amount of time.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, if I could read one last quote to sum it up from
Yeah.
Curtius. So Curtius says of Alexander, it's actually near the beginning of Curtius, but he says, quote, "His natural qualities were as follows: incredible mental energy and an almost excessive tolerance of fatigue, courage exemplary not just in comparison with kings, but even with men possessing this virtue and no other, generosity such that he often granted greater gifts than even the gods are asked for, clemency towards the defeated, returning kingdoms to men from whom he had taken them, or giving them as gifts, continuous disregard for death, which frightens most others out of their minds, a lust for glory and fame, reaching a degree which exceeded due proportion, but was yet pardonable in view of his youth and great achievements." End quote.
That's a good quote. That's a very good summary.
Yeah, so I mean, that's it. I suppose one of the last things I would just say is maybe about Alexander's body. That it was taken on some, it was placed in some incredibly elaborate beer, funeral beer. It was supposed to be all covered in gold and all sorts of things. It's supposed to be taken back to
Wasn't it preserved in honey or something like that?
the actual body.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's so
Yeah.
elaborate and ornate what they did, and it was supposed to be taken back to Macedonia because he dies in Babylon, and
It
on
goes
the
to
way.
Alexandria, doesn't it?
Well, that's the thing. On the way, Ptolemy sort of intercepts it and just takes it back to Alexandria and has
Yeah.
it there for the prestige
Yeah, of
of
course. Yeah, yeah.
and it stayed in Alexandria until we're not sure when, but probably around 390, at some point around then in the Christian period.
Yeah.
And we don't know what happened exactly, but it's now entirely lost. And
Yeah,
there's
because didn't Commodus go there and take his armor or something like that?
who? Sorry.
Commodus.
Oh right, yeah.
I
Oh
think
yeah,
it
it
was
was a place.
Commodus who went and took Alexander's
Yeah, I
armor.
mean Augustus visited it, and that was a thing to do, and Caligula, I think. Yeah, so Commodus, I'm sure it was a thing to do to go and visit Alexander's tomb. Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so yeah, and Alexander's slipped into legend. Yeah, well, that's it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and that's the story of Alexander, which is again just like it's just such an epic thing to go through that it's totally worth your time to read. Like Plutarch at the very least. You know, Plutarch is such a beautiful writer that you know it's just enjoyable. But the quality of the story is just excellent. Definitely recommended.
Yeah, I would recommend Plutarch first. First of all, it's the shortest, and it's a biography. It's meant to be a bit more interesting, meant to be about the
Yeah,
man.
yeah,
He even says explicitly, "I'm interested in little asides and little anecdotes. I'm not necessarily interested in the exact formations at Gaugamela or anything. I want
mm,
to know little things about the character of the man." So in that sense, yeah, it's a lot
yeah.
more accessible and easier and fun, really. So yeah, I'd go with that. But no, thanks again for your time, Carl. I mean, this has
Oh,
been
anytime, man.
an epically long one. So
Yeah, yeah, that's all right. I don't mind. I like I said, I really enjoyed doing it because I really enjoy doing these things. But you know, if you get an idea of which next one you want to cover in like a month or so, we can do it. I'm up for it.
oh, brilliant! Thanks a
That's all
lot.
right, man.
I thought maybe we could do just a short one if you want to do a tighter one, maybe a bit shorter. Do Pyrrhus.
Dude, I'd
'Cause
totally be down for doing Pyrrhus.
yeah, because
I think he's probably my favorite of all of them because he's a total hero and he doesn't really win and it
yeah.
sucks. It's like he's just missed opportunity after missed opportunity and it's gutting. Reading the life of Pyrrhus is gutting at the end of
Yeah.
it. So I'd be very happy to do Pyrrhus. Yeah,
And we've got Plutarch's Life on Pyrrhus.
yeah,
So yeah, it's like a nice, short, little, tight little thing, and
yes,
yeah,
yeah,
I love it as well. And it's a great crossover if we do more of these.
yeah.
It's a great transition into the Roman world, because it's really where the Hellenistic
Yeah.
world clashes with Rome, isn't it?
Yeah, and Pyrrhus, if I recall correctly, he was a cousin of Alexander's, so it's also connected to the Alexander narrative, and yeah, it's where the Romans first start putting themselves on the map, you know. So
Yeah.
yeah, yeah, no, Pyrrhus is a very good suggestion. Definitely do him next.
All right, cheers. Well, I guess I'll let you go. This has really been crazily long, so
That's all right, right.
I feared it might be, but yeah, thanks again.
No worries, man. Take it easy.
All
Looking
right,
forward to
you
the next
too.
one.
Ta-da.
Bye.